Hey everyone. Welcome back to the channel where we will explore what-if scenarios of Deku, so we'll explore if Deku had green dragon breath quirk. I'm so excited to have you here with me today. I know most of you listen to this video while working or doing something, so this is part 2, and I request you to check out the original work of the author, link in the description. The name of the story is Breath of the Dragon by Kozo. So do check out this fanfic. Let's jump right in. Thank you all for coming. Nezu greeted his teachers. With the sports festival days away, I wanted to touch base with everyone and see if there are any last-minute requests. Aizawa immediately raised his hand. No, Aizawa-kun, we can't cancel the sports festival. Aizawa grumbled as he lowered his hand, sinking into his capture weapon. Even if there wasn't a threat to our student safety, cancelling it this late into the process would be disastrous for not just UA, but for everybody involved. Majima-kun, how are things progressing with updating security? The short bare-chested man sat up straighter in his chair. His orange hair covering the entire upper half of his face, an excavator claw-shaped helmet sat on the table in front of him. They're about as good as they can get, given the width-scale changes you wanted. He tapped on the conference table. A holograph popped up, displaying a camera feed. From the looks of it, the view was of the conference room itself. All of the cameras have been upgraded to have facial recognition, with a direct link to multiple precinct servers for any and all processed criminals. The analysis is done in real time and can work with a minimum of 30% facial clearance, with a 97% accuracy rating. Wonderful. Nezu chirped, and the sensor array? Majima scratched his head, dismissing the holograph. That one is still in the works, unfortunately. The villains that attacked the USJ had the forethought of ensuring we were completely blocked out for the duration of the attack, and because warp/teleporting quirks are rare, I don't know exactly how to track it, let alone develop a way to scramble it. The footage we had from the attack helps, but there isn't much data I can pull from that. He paused, taking in the confused looks of his coworkers and Nezu's expectant gaze. Oh come on now, that wasn't even actual technical language. Majima groaned, rubbing his temples. Under his breath he mumbled something, but no one was able to catch what he said. No, the sensor array and scrambler aren't working yet. I know far too little about the warp quirk to develop any dependable means to work against it. Which means he stressed this word a bit more, hoping that everyone else was still following. There is still a chance that we could be attacked while the festival is going on. He sat back in his chair, crossing his arms, his fingers drumming annoyedly. A heavy silence fell on the room as they processed the fact that there was still a major threat to security. It's unfortunate, but this shouldn't be a problem. The spiky white-haired hero spoke up, trying to boost the morale. We've already increased our in-person security 5-fold. Principal Nezu said he was able to contract heroes to patrol around the grounds, and we'll have who knows how many plain-clothed cops walking around as well. Adding the upgraded cameras to the mix, I'd say we're pretty well covered. If someone tries to start something, they'll be shut down immediately. Vlad, well, I appreciate your optimism. I don't think you truly understand the scope of the villains we're worried about. Aizawa spoke up. These villains, Shigaraki and Kurogiri, they aren't your run-of-the-mill bank robbers. Shigaraki is smart, and Kurogiri is an asset that we have no way of confronting. And I think you're overestimating them, Vlad replied gruffly. I'm not going to act like I know what I'm talking about when it comes to the villains, because that would be an insult to everyone that was affected, but from what I've heard regarding them, we don't need to worry about an attack during the sports festival. The other teachers stared at Vlad, silently asking him to carry on. If they're half as smart as you make them out to be, then a widespread attack is the last thing on their mind. All Might and Principal Nezu both said that there could be some ulterior motive to the attack, and I think we're witnessing it right now. Aizawa, your whole gimmick is making rational and logical decisions, but you pushing so hard to cancel the festival is the exact opposite. Take a step back and think. Vlad could tell he had everyone's attention when he saw everyone's heads turn between Vlad and Aizawa. Anyone who has ever met Aizawa knows that he prides himself on non-biased and logic-based decisions, so being called out like this is unheard of. You were attacked, but you came out relatively unscathed. All Might was attacked and came out no worse than he normally is. Your students were attacked and the worst injury was a broken hand. Shigaraki could have killed you and everyone there but didn't. Do you ever wonder why? Aizawa hissed every day since. But what about 13, then? 13 was attacked and survived, had the worst injuries out of everyone, but will make a full recovery. Vlad-kun, Nezu interjected, his paws steepled on the table. As much as I love hearing your opinion, might I remind you that we are still on a bit of a schedule. I have an idea of your point, but I would like for it to be made in a timely manner. Vlad sighed, shaking his head. I believe Shigaraki's ulterior motive was to create fear and panic, while making us doubt ourselves. He purposefully attacked the USJ and wanted to get in our heads. He wants us to fear him, and he did that by showing us exactly how easy it was for him to do it. Aizawa was stunned into silence. Not only did Vlad call him out on irrationality, but it seems that he also was able to solve the problem that evaded himself and even Nezu. The staff liked to joke around a lot and generally gravitated towards having Vlad on the receiving end because of his reactions, but they all forgot one thing. Vlad King was still a pro with a respectable record. He reacts accordingly based on the joke because he takes everything in at face value. With him being so far removed from the problem, he had the clearest look at the situation. "What makes you so sure that he won't attack the festival?" a voice asked. Vlad turned his head to face the hero it belonged to. The hero, in simple terms, looked like a block of cement, with small eyes set near the top of his head and mouth set in a perpetual frown. If his goal was to create fear, then wouldn't the festival be the perfect opportunity? Thousands, if not millions of people watch it from home, and at least tens of thousands will be present in person. Because of what All Might said, Vlad pointed at the man, who coughed up blood into a handkerchief. "Well, what did I say?" All Might spluttered. "You said that he didn't seem crazed." Vlad pointed directly at him. "The type of people that would launch an attack of that magnitude on that many people has to be unstable to a certain degree. They want chaos for the sake of chaos. But because Shigaraki acted as if he had a certain goal, he doesn't fit that category." Aizawa finished. He sat slouched in his chair, seemingly deflating as his head dipped ever further within his capture weapon. "The sports festival should go off without a hitch, yes," Vlad concluded. After an undeterminable amount of time, Nezu spoke up again. "Does anybody have anything more to add?" He was met with a resounding silence, everyone still caught up in what they just witnessed. "Then I believe this meeting is adjourned. Please resume your preparations. The sports festival will begin in 2 days' time." Pajero, the speakers on the TV crackled to life. "The sports festival is soon. What do you plan to do about it?" Pajero stopped typing on his laptop to peek at the TV. As always, no video was shown, but there was no mistake that All for One was on the other end. He glanced at Kurogiri, who stood at his place behind the bar, his eyes asking if he called. With no response from him, Kajero turned to face the TV fully. "The only plan I have for that is simply to watch it from here. I would try to go in person, but All Might and some of the students saw my face," he responded. "I'm also certain that UA upped their security since the attack, so getting in and out of there unnoticed won't be as easy as before. Surely that isn't enough of a deterrent for you." "It isn't, but I would have nothing to gain from seeing it in person. The entire event is televised, so I would arguably get a better idea of the student skills than if I were confined to the stadium. The longer my exposure out there, the greater the risk I'd get found out. Your penchant for caution is admirable, but there are times when you must take a bold step forward. If you continue to hide out, you not only eventually lose any courage you have to take that step, but you also lose any hope of growing. You have stated multiple times that you don't want to lose the momentum you gained, yet all you've done since is take heroes out of the picture behind the scenes. The only people aware of what you've done are in this room, the heroes themselves, and the hero killer. I heard your conversation with him, I heard the plans that you were making after Jiren left, I heard what you did with the heroes. I may have given you my blessing for the long-term goal, but you haven't been making any real progress towards reaching it." Pajero could hear the subtle shift in All for One's voice the longer he talked. He heard it change from inquisitive to lecturing to almost impatience. "Do I have to step in for you?" Pajero lightly bristled at the tone and implication, even Kurogiri's form faltered for a second. Kajero slowly turned his head to Kurogiri, silently he mouthed water at him. A glass was immediately pushed forth. Kajero took a long sip before answering, trying to come up with an appropriate response. "And no, master. That would be unnecessary," he eventually choked out. "Is it not? You've shown me great potential with your work, yet ever since we had our talk, you have yet to truly take initiative. Your lack of action makes me wonder if you truly have your heart set on the motion." "Master, if I may," Kurogiri tried to placate. "No," All for One cut him off. "I want to hear this from him." Pajero felt like he was back in the room in front of All for One. He could feel the oppressing force he exudes and couldn't help but stumble his way through as his mind raced to find a way out of the situation as close to amicably as he could. "I want to buy as much time as I can before I start making my moves. I used the USJ as a test." He paused, trying to find the words. "Society's been lulled into a state of relative peace because of All Might, and I learned that because of that, UA has become just as lax as everyone else. The rat calling himself principal isn't as omniscient or omnipotent he likes to believe, and because they're a school first, they have no real authority outside of school matters. The sports festival will be filled to the brim with heroes and civilians alike, and will probably be decked out with the best security UA could upgrade to in the time between. If I were to attack it, I'd be announcing myself to the whole world, which I'm not ready to do yet. Yet you're willing to show yourself to UA, one of the best hero schools in the country, with no problem." Pajero perked up a little. He heard the tone change, but he didn't dare to get his hopes up too high. "I can deal with the heroes they have on staff, that much I'm sure of. He shifted a little in his seat. I can deal with random heroes showing up in the city, but having everyone on the lookout for me isn't something I want to deal with right now. That's why I want to recruit people first, bolster my numbers and cover my blind spots. Pajero, if you are looking to recruit, would it not be better if we ask around ourselves? Kurogiri spoke up, we have the list we received from Jiren, so should we not follow up? He shook his head, no, if we start going after them ourselves, we'll make ourselves look needy and desperate. And master, he leveled a look toward the TV, I'm sorry to say, but if you get more involved than you already are, we might end up with way more heat on both sides than I'd be comfortable with. The bar stilled, anxiously waiting for a response. Kajero tentatively finished his water and passed the glass to Kurogiri, who carefully and quietly started to clean it off. That was well thought out, Kajero all for one's voice cut through the silence, very well. I'll stay my hand for now, but I do expect results. Kajero bowed his head towards the TV, thank you master. I promise I won't disappoint. See to it you don't. The TV clicked off, leaving Kajero and Kurogiri to stare at each other, both releasing a relieved sigh. Kajero, do you truly plan on not attending the sports festival? Kurogiri asked, it would be no bother to me to warp you in undetected. I really wasn't planning on it, but after that I feel like I have no choice, Kajero lamented. At the very least I'll get an idea of what kind of upgrades UA made and maybe see who they can get to work as security. Pajero puffed a little smoke in the air, leaning back into the chair he scratched the back of his head. Getting into UA wouldn't be a problem. Getting recognized would be a pain. Getting out would be even more so. Maybe I'll see if our little helper can't do anything about that. His phone rang, taking him from his thoughts. Not looking at who was calling, he picked it up, what? On the other side of the call, an annoyed grunt came out, nice to hear from you too. Listen, I don't know what you did or said to the hero killer, but now I'm getting contacts and requests left and right. Pajero sat up, his attention fully on the conversation, I went through most of them, but only 3 stood out so far. Do you want me to tell them to go to your place or are you going to pick them up? Tell them to gather at Buraka Scrapyard tonight at 9, I'll have Kurogiri bring them over. I want you here as well. You can either join them or get here however you normally do. Kajero ended the call there. I assume Jiren came through. He did. Kajero tapped on the bar top and thought, maybe there is something to do about the sports festival after all. 20 minutes before 9 hit, Jiren walked through the door, his cigarette already lit. He sauntered up to the bar top to the seat he was at last time, Kurogiri passed him an ashtray as Jiren ordered a drink. A glass of whiskey on the rocks was pushed forward, the round ice cube swirling in the liquid. Jiren picked up the glass, nodding and toasting to both Kurogiri and the TV. Taking a swig, he let out a pleasured sigh, so where's the young master at? He wanted me to come by, but didn't have the decency to greet me when I come in. Pajero Shigaraki had to step out for a moment. Kurogiri narrowed his eyes, he mentioned something about wanting to make sure something's ready. He should be back momentarily. Jiren let out an unamused grunt, returning to his cigarette and drink. Seeing as Kurogiri no longer wanted to engage in conversation, he took the quiet moment to appreciate the absolute normality of the bar. The shelves were stocked with a wide variety of spirits, most of them Jiren couldn't even recognize. Licenses and certificates were displayed on one of the walls, and it had a cozy feel to it. Had someone accidentally stumbled onto it, aside from the misty bartender, they would assume it was any other dive bar. The phone dinged from behind the bar, and wordlessly Kurogiri opened a portal. Kajero walked through, dressed in what looked like his villain outfit minus the knives sheathed on his legs, affixing his mask to his face, before lightly dusting himself off. He glanced at Jiren and then to the clock hanging on the wall opposite to the bar and shrugged. Thanks for making it out here, he greeted. Jiren puffed a few times on his cigarette before putting it out, think nothing of it, but even if you hadn't asked, I still would have come with them. It's only right I introduce them myself, and besides he swirled his glass, watching the ice ball spin with the movement, figured if I got here early, I could enjoy myself a bit. By all means. Kajero lazily swept his arm out, gesturing to the bar. Kurogiri, it's nearly 9, why don't you bring them in? Kurogiri bowed as he disappeared within the mist. Returning his attention to Jiren, so what can you tell me before they get here? Well, only one of them has a real record, the other 2 are relatively green. Pajero paused, his head quirked to the right, didn't I ask for seasoned criminals? If they're green, that means I'd have to babysit them. And here I thought you were smart, Jiren retorted, downing the rest of his drink, you also said you wouldn't mind if they have a coat of sorts. If they're green, you can change them to whatever form or color you want. Pajero's eyes crinkled as he smiled, his eyes taking on a dangerous glint. He was about to reply, but was cut off by the swirling purple of Kurogiri's portal. He stopped mid-thought and stepped back, allowing for more room on the floor. 3 figures walked through the portal, with Kurogiri materializing at the back. The first and tallest of the trio had spiky black hair, piercing blue eyes, and horribly burned and purple skin. Staples lined the borders between the healthy and burned skin holding them together. He wore a loose-fitting shirt under a ratty black jacket, black chino high-water pants and shoes. The second was a teenage girl with ash blonde hair and twin messy buns. Her eyes were yellow and cat-like with excitement shimmering just beneath the surface. She wore a slightly oversized beige cardigan over what looked like a sailor suit uniform, with knee-length black socks and brown loafers. The third looked even younger than the girl. He was dressed in a standard gakurin with teal gloves and white shoes, light brown tousled hair rested on his head. Under his arm he held a gas mask and green helmet that looked like they came from a military surplus store. Pajero didn't move to talk with them, opting to study the new arrivals and get a clue of what he was dealing with. None of the three looked like they were going to speak either. The black-haired man was looking over the bottles on the shelves instead, and the girl looked more lost and confused the longer the silence dragged on. The boy was the only one among them that tried to appear professional, trying to match the stare he was receiving from Kajero. Jiren, while thoroughly enjoying the standoff, decided he needed to be the one to start the conversation. He stood up from his stool and hooked an arm around the black-haired man, who looked displeased by the contact. "Guess I'll have to be the adult in this situation," he opened. "Shigaraki, may I present to you Himiko Toga, Dabi, and Mustard." The girl, Toga, perked up and waved animatedly. The black-haired and burned man, Dabi, just barely nodded his head in acknowledgement while shoving Jiren off his shoulders. The young boy, Mustard, readjusted his helmet and mask under his arm. Jiren stuck a thumb out, pointing to Toga. "Let's start with girly over here." With initial introductions out of the way, whatever trepidation or nervousness that held Toga were gone. "I'm Himiko Toga. And you're the one Mr. Staney was talking about." She cut Jiren off, her expression dropped to a serious glare. A knife appeared in her hand as she leveled it in front of her. "Is it true? Are you really working together?" Pajero took the change in tone in stride. "My definition of working together may be different than yours. I can tell you had more to say, so just finish it up." Toga held her glare for a second longer before her wide smile came back, the knife disappearing. Kajero didn't notice at first, but now that he's focusing on her, he sees defined canine teeth. Mild carnivore mutation. "I wanna live in the world Mr. Staney is trying to make. This world isn't fun, too many people are mean. Without the meanies in the world, I can finally feel at home." Pajero nodded and gestured to Dabi to start. Dabi looked Kajero over before starting. "What, you don't want to know her quirk? Don't think I didn't see you eyeing her." Impressive. Kajero's eyes darted to Dabi's. "You're sharper than you look." "But no, I'm saving that question for the end. What's your piece?" "I go by Dabi," he huffed. "As for my piece, I plan to carry on the hero killer's will long after he passes. If he doesn't want me, fine. I'll join you and help him from the sidelines." Dabi stared Kajero down, daring him to make a comment. "He may have pointed me towards you, but ultimately I follow his will. If there's one thing I want most out of this partnership, it's the death of Endeavor." At that, Kajero was intrigued. He was used to hearing people spout about how they want to kill All Might and any other hero, but those were always weak shows of strength. Dabi meant what he said and truly believed he could do it. Getting restless from having to wait, Mustard spoke up without his prompt. "I'm Mustard. My quirk lets me release a gas that puts people to sleep and—" "I'm stopping you right there," Kajero cut him off. "Do you even know what this is? What's happening right now? This isn't the first day at school, kid." Dabi rolled his eyes and Toga stifled a giggle. "Why are you here?" Mustard paused, looking between the occupants of the bar, searching for a lifeline that wouldn't be thrown. He sighed, hunching his shoulders in defeat. Kajero felt his breath hitch, his vision flickering, overlapping Mustard and a shadow of an old memory. "I'm bullied at school and I'm unwanted at home," Mustard confessed. "My parents, if you could even call them that, don't care what I do so long as the only reason I'm home is to sleep. At school I'm forced into a literal bubble because they don't want my quirk accidentally going haywire. The kids kick it around and cover the vents, so I run out of air to breathe. I'm tired of being put down for something that I had no power in choosing." Mustard looked up at Kajero, his eyes shining with determination. "I'm here because the heroes made my life turn to absolute shit. They preach about how anyone can be a hero, but what they're really saying is anyone with a cool and flashy quirk can be a hero. Because my quirk isn't cool, it gives everyone the right to push me down, and I'm sick of it. I want to change how society looks at quirks." Kajero was impressed. Not only are their goals aligned with his, but there was also enough wiggle room in their goals to fit his. He made eye contact with Jiren, who just smirked. Jiren started a slow clap. "Well done everyone, I couldn't have said it better myself. Now Shigaraki, anything you have to say to these wonderful, upstanding citizens? You all aren't half bad, but only one of you has a body count, and while that's not necessary, I need to know just how far you're willing to lose yourself, particularly you." Kajero pointed at Mustard. "You're just a kid. You're jaded and have a major chip on your shoulder, but you're way too young to seriously be considering this path. Are you actually a villain? Dobby laughed. What villain tries to make others reconsider their life's choices? The kind of villain that isn't single-minded. Kajero shot back, or an absolute scum of a person. I may be a villain, but that doesn't mean I don't have standards. Now Mustard, are you 100% certain that you want to continue down this path? It won't be easy and it will involve blood. Mustard fiddled with his helmet and mask and thought. All the while this was going down, Toga sat herself down on one of the stools and was lazily spinning herself around, seemingly lost in her own world while she waited for whatever was happening next. Mustard finally came up with his answer. I'm sure. There's nothing at home for me and no one I care about. I'm starting over and if it means I'll have to kill someone to prove it, then I will. Kajero studied him closely, young, impressionable, willing to get his hands dirty. He moved on to Dobby, who noticed and matched the look, arrogant, observant, clear motivation. Finally he looked at Toga, who was now sipping on a drink that Kurogiri must have given her, outcast, carefree, already ingrained in the life. Kajero reached up to his mask and retracted it, fine. Kurogiri, get Jiren his payment for the lot. Hearing that, Jiren gave a lazy bow in gratitude. As for you three, welcome to the league. As a formal introduction, my name is Kajero Shigaraki, over there behind the bar is Kurogiri. Toga, Dobby, what are your quirks? And Dobby, Mustard, your names. Having received his payment, Jiren cut in quickly before they got started. I'll take my leave, then. Shigaraki, I'll let you know if there are any more. Again, now that the boring stuff was out of the way, Toga was back to her cheery self. My quirk is called Transform. It lets me change into anybody I want so long as I drink their blood. The more blood I have, the longer the transformation holds. She pointed to her teeth. My canines are sharp so that I can bite into people and drink their blood directly, but I don't like doing that unless they're cute. She crossed her arms in an X. That explains the teeth, but what was the source for the change? Toga seemed done with her explanation and was looking towards Dobby with interest. He sighed and brought his hand up, conjuring a ball of blue fire. Kajero's eyes sparkled. That will pair perfectly. That's my quirk. As for my name, I don't know you well enough to give it to you, so you're stuck with Dobby. I'm not budging on this. Mustard shifted on his feet. I'm not giving you my name either. If I'm starting anew, then I want to leave everything of my old life behind. Kurogiri, bring them to the warehouse. Kajero abruptly changed the topic. He addressed the group. I want to get a feel for your skills, so we're going to have a little test. That was all the warning they got before portals opened beneath them, swallowing them in the darkness. Shimura grunted as he was slammed onto the mats once again. He immediately swept his legs around, catching his opponent off guard. Getting back on his feet, he jumped at the downed opponent. From there fight devolved into intense grappling. He made sure to always keep a finger up so he doesn't accidentally disintegrate his opponent, a weakness that was constantly exploited as his opponent kept grabbing the extended finger and wiggling out of a hold. Shimura was able to secure the opponent's arm, seconds away from getting them into an armbar, before he felt a jolting pain in his right hand. He let go in shock, scrambling away. Shimura. You okay, man? Kaminari questioned. I swear you had me for good right then. Shimura cradled his right hand, shaking it off lightly. Yeah, I'm good. My hand just acted up. Is that normal? I thought you said recovery girl healed it for you, Kaminari asked as he stood back up. He grabbed a water bottle and handed it over. She did. Shimura nodded. Thanks, like, I can still use it and my quirk just fine, but my hand just randomly flares up in pain from time to time. I already asked her what's wrong, but she couldn't find anything. That's the hand that got crushed, right? Shimura flinched at the memory. Kaminari immediately backtracked. Right, sorry about that. Shimura waved him off, instead busying himself with taking a long swig of the water. But hey. Thanks for agreeing to spar with me. I know I'm not the best fighter in the class, but if I can keep up with you, I know I can do well in the sports festival. Kaminari tried to lighten the mood. Shimura smiled, happily taking the change in topic. You and me both. But if I'm being honest, I think you do better than I will. What do you mean? Kaminari frowned in confusion. I mean, your quirk is way more versatile than mine, Shimura explained. You've got good offense and defense, while I'm only really good for offense and clearance. And killing his mind added on. Kaminari waved his hands in front of him. What? No way, man. I have basically no control over it and a limited amount. Not to mention, if I go over that, I get all wee, he emphasized as he acted out his way state as he jokingly called it. Shimura hummed in agreement and gave a small smile, but it didn't reach his eyes. But you can still touch people and have decent range. I have my gloves, but something tells me I won't be able to use them for the festival, and the only way for me to use my quirk is if I'm in close contact. If I make it to the final round, I won't be able to fight properly. Okay, first. It's when you make it to the final round, Kaminari quickly reassured, holding up his fingers as he counted his points, and you don't even need to fight to win a match. All you gotta do is grab their arm or something and boom. They're forced to surrender. I thought the whole point of the sports festival was to show off your quirk. Oh yeah, Kaminari quickly conceded, but when you make it to first place, I don't think people will care about your quirk since all they'll want is to work with the winner. Besides, there'll be 3 events total. I bet you could show them what you can do in the first 2 rounds. Shimura's eyes widened in realization. He turned to Kaminari and gave a real smile. I totally forgot about the first 2 events. Thanks, Kaminari. Kaminari flashed him a smile and gave him a thumbs up. No problem, dude. Now come on, let's get cleaned up. I hear Bakugo's making dinner tonight and I wanna hide all the super spicy spices before he gets started. He makes great food, but I swear he no longer has taste buds. You're just weak against spice. Kaminari stuck his tongue out and headed to the showers. Shimura chuckled and shook his head, amused at his friend's antics. The sports festival is my chance to prove I can be a hero, I can't let this go to waste. He shook his head in determination. He was going to win the festival, and when he did, he'd give a nice big middle finger to Kajero as he bit into his gold medal. I am a hero, damn it. Shimura felt the crowd as soon as he and his class entered the tunnel. He could feel the sound wave of the crowd get funneled in and focused on the students waiting for their cue. If he placed his hand on one of the walls, he could feel it rumble from the spectators in the stands above him. He was in complete awe at the whole spectacle before him. Wow, Siro remarked, it's like an earthquake in here. It's crazy to think how many people are probably standing right over us. It's pretty intimidating. Speak for yourself, man. Kirishima knocked his hardened fists together, hearing those screams out there is amping me up. I can't wait to start this thing. Everyone. Iida's voice cut through the conversations, the sports festival is going to begin momentarily. Let us all prepare to exit and give our best performance for all. Not the best rallying speech, Vice Pres Kaminari chuckled, but it's alright cause I'm ready to go. Shimura stood beside Uraraka and Bakugo, letting his classmates' excitement and nerves wash right over him. He was too busy trying to think about how he could stand out in the festival. Everyone's going to be trying their hardest today, but here I am, about to willingly handicap myself. How can I even bother to stand in the same stands as them if I won't try my hardest myself? He felt a nudge on his arm, looking over he saw Uraraka giving him a concerned look. Are you alright, Shimura-kun? You're looking kinda. She waved her hands above her head aimlessly, unable to find the word. He gave her a shy smile, he brought his arms up and lightly rubbed on them. I think I'm okay. I'm just getting a little nervous about this whole thing. Yeah, I know what you mean. She gave him a warm smile. It's crazy to think we'd be doing this so early into the year, especially when we barely got any training done. That's intentional, round-faced Bakugo cut in. This is when we first get looked at by pros. If we show them how good we are with only a few weeks of training, they'll know we're the real deal and they'll want to work with us. Uraraka brought a finger up to her chin. Yeah, that makes sense. I hope I. She was cut off as President Mick's voice sounded out over the speaker system. Yeah, swarm, mass media. Gather around, one and all. The UA Sports Festival is about to begin. It's time to go. Uraraka flashed Shimura a determined smile. Alright class. Yaoi Rozu's voice sounded out over a megaphone, trying to talk over President Mick's introductions. We're about to head out. Even though this is a competition, I'd still like for us all to work together if given the chance, so that we can all make it to the finals. Good luck to everyone. The chorus of cheers came up from the gathered students. Shimura shook himself out, willing his nerves to calm down. He felt Bakugo slug him in his arm. The silent reminder that he had his friend next to him helped calm down all the way. I got this. You know who they are. The rising stars who faced down villains and came out stronger and brighter than ever. From the first year's hero course, Class 1A. The class exited the tunnel and nearly stumbled as they were met with the combined force of the bright sun and the intensity of the crowd's excitement. Every seat in the stadium was filled, the occupants yelling and cheering and shouting as they finally got to see the competitors. Wow, I guess what we felt in the tunnel wasn't exaggerated at all, Kaminari remarked, smiling and waving at everyone, playing up the crowd. Next up. They may not have gotten the attention, but that doesn't mean they're pushovers. Introducing Hero Course, Class 1B. President Mick continued his introductions as the other classes came out of their respective tunnels. The cheers were still deafening, but noticeably less than for their own entrance. Class 1B came out of the tunnel to their left, all of them in similar states of awe at the spectacle. Shimura glanced over to see the members of his sister class. He saw a wide variety of people, but what stood out the most was the number of stink eyes he was getting. A fair amount of the students were glaring at both him and the rest of his class, most notably was from a boy with slick blonde hair and light blue eyes. Not knowing what to make of it, he returned the glares with a confused look of his own before turning away to look over the crowd again. Now, coming from our general education track, classes 1C, D, and E. Don't take your eyes off these students, they're full of underdogs that can turn the tides. Man, is there really any reason for us to be here? He heard someone from the general education voice, we're only here to make the hero course look good. Well, that may be true, but at least we aren't from management, another replied, pointing a thumb behind them. Shimura followed the thumb to what he assumed was the management/business course. They were still waiting in their own tunnel, waiting for their cue, but Shimura saw their point. Every one of them looked utterly disinterested, choosing to stand in small groups, huddled together talking about whatever it is they're going over. Coming out of the tunnels looking like some crazy cyborgs are support corps students, classes 1F, G, and H. Last but not least, rounding out the classes, we have those from our business and management course, classes 1I, J, and K. There wasn't much pomp for the last few groups, as it was clear the only reason they were there was because they were forced to be. With all 11 first-year classes out on the field, they gathered in front of the small stage set up in the middle. From behind the stage, the students could see who the referee for this year's festival would be. A smock of dark purple and spiky hair showed up behind the stage, followed by red domino-shaped glasses. A few steps later, the R-rated hero. Midnight came to view in all of her sultry glory. With the referee properly introduced, the crowd's yells seemed to reach a second crescendo. She took center stage, brandishing her cat o' nine tails whip and flicking it to the side, causing another round of whoops to be heard. Welcome to this year's UA Sports Festival. She opened, now that all the classes have gathered, a word from our student representative. She paused for dramatic effect, the audience waiting with bated breath as she let it right out, Tenko Shimura. He heard his classmates' jaws drop on the floor. Shimura himself blanched in shock. Whoa, Shimura. I didn't know you beat Bakugo in the entrance exam, the big lip student, Sato, commented. It would make sense that the student representative is the person who placed first, Ida commented. Shut it, big lips, Bakugo bit, the nerd only beat me by a few points for some bullshit reason. But I scored more in villain points. Off to the side, another snide remark came from a girl from general education, first place in the entrance exam for the hero course, maybe. Tenko Shimura, come on up. Midnight prompted again, completely ignoring his inner turmoil. The people in front of him parted, making a path for him up to the stage. He anxiously scratched at his throat and stepped forward. When he finally made it to the stage, he stared out at the audience. He tapped on the microphone, causing feedback to sound out through the speakers. He saw his classmates and teacher wince in response, to be completely honest, I had no idea I was doing this. So, here I go. He took a deep breath, looking over at Midnight for reassurance. She smiled and gave him a nod. He cleared his throat again, everyone standing before me earned their right to be here, whether in the hero, gen ed, support, or business course. He paused again, trying to gather his thoughts, taking in the audience's silence as he was searching for motivation. As if on cue, his hand flared up in pain again, immediately reminding him of what he bore witness to at the USJ. On the first day, my class was told that it's a hero's job is to correct the unfairness in the world. Then, on the fourth day of class, we saw just how unfair the world could be. He saw some of his classmates nod their heads solemnly, clearly remembering the USJ. It's unfair that some of the students in Gen Ed couldn't make it into the hero course when I'm sure they have amazing quirks for a hero. He heard gasps come from the general education area, more than a few of the students' eyes were wide and had their jaws open. It's unfair to the students who are here competing today when they'd probably rather be tinkering. He gestured towards the support course, getting a few nods or whatever it is the business students do. One of the students in the back yelled out, fair enough. Shimura looked straight into one of the cameras he knew that was focused on him. It's unfair that my class was attacked. But you know what? That's fine, because we're all still standing. We're putting ourselves out there to show that we are strong. We're all heroes, whether in name or ideals, and we will do anything and everything we can to make everything fair again. So this is a challenge for you. I'll be giving it my all today to win this, and I'll be giving it my all to make my dream come true. The same could be said about everybody here. We're all going to move forward, and nobody will stand in our way. We're all going to go beyond. Shimura trailed off. Plus ultra. The stadium and students alike erupted in unity at the school's motto. Shimura stood stunned on the platform, both ashamed and proud of what he just said. He went completely off track with where he wanted to go with his speech. He didn't mean to say half of the things he did, and he certainly didn't mean to call out a certain villain that was no doubt watching this very moment, but he somehow turned it into a pretty inspiring speech. He lit a fire under everyone's seats, one that he's sure wasn't going to go out, no matter what was thrown at them. He felt pride in his classmates at their tenacity as he stepped down. As he rejoined his class back on the field, he received more than a few back pats and words of thanks and encouragement. He was sure that his friends and classmates were praising him for his passionate speech, but he wasn't paying attention. What the hell did I just do? That was so stupid. As if we needed another reason to have a target painted on our backs. My stupid mouth is gonna get me killed. Midnight retook her place on the stage. What a way to start off the festival. What do you all think? She was met with yells once again, flashing a smile before cracking her whip. Now hush, mommy's speaking. It's time for the first event. Kilometers away in the bar, Kajero, Dabi, and Kurogiri were watching the sports festival kick off. Kajero sat at his normal bar stool, nursing his gin and tonic, staring intently at the TV. He saw Shimura-chan step up to the stage. He leaned forward in interest, cranking the volume up so he could hear what he was saying. And nothing, nobody will stand in our way. We're all going to go beyond the little Shimura-chan said on the TV. He was staring right into the camera, making it look as if he was staring right at Kajero. Oh? Is that a dare, little Shimura-chan? A dark chuckle left his mouth, a puff of smoke soon after. Dabi caught his comment, so that's the brat you were talking about. He looks crustier than me. What's so special about him? He's a wolf trying to live among sheep. I know it. Dabi gave him an unimpressed stare. Right. As much as I enjoy day drinking with my new illustrious leader, why keep me here when you've got the other two out? You're way too noticeable. Even if you cover up, you look even more suspicious. Mustard's still a kid with a clean slate and Toga's quirk lets her look like anyone. Why would I send someone that stands out so much to spy around a place crawling with heroes? I'm not talking about why I'm not at the festival. I'm not stupid enough to think I could sneak around there, Dabi drawled, swirling his own glass. I'm talking about why keep me cooped up here when I could be doing literally anything else. Pajero turned the volume back down on the TV, spinning in his stool, so he faced Dabi, because you and I will pair together well. I wanted us to get a little closer. I don't swing that way, Dabi immediately shot out. I'm talking about quirks, idiot. I'm not gay either. Kajero rolled his eyes. He took another sip of his drink before pushing it away and rolled up a sleeve, conjuring a ball of fire just like Dabi did. I'm a fire type as well, but I'm limited to white. Kajero's eyes focused a little as he willed the fire hotter, the color changing from orange to yellow to white, emphasizing his point. Kajero Shigaraki, please don't start fires in here. I don't want the alarms to go off again, Kurogiri admonished. Kajero let a breath out, releasing the fire as well. Dabi continued to look unimpressed, so? I've seen plenty of fire quirks. Yours is nothing special. Maybe, but neither is yours. Kajero shrugged, swiveling so he's back to facing the bar. You can produce blue, but based on your scarring, you can't maintain it too long else you'll burn up. I'll bet you learned that the hard way, right? Dabi tensed ever so slightly. Kajero smiled in amusement and kept talking. Every fire user has the same basic weakness. We can't sustain the fire too long or we risk burning ourselves. Your threshold is probably a lot lower than most of ours. What's your point? Dabi asked, still slightly on edge. Unless you're saying you can somehow get rid of that problem, I'm no longer interested in this conversation. Kajero gave an amused huff, lighten up a little. I'm just trying to figure out what makes you tick, but I am serious about me wanting to get to know you better. With your fire and my quirk, there really isn't too much that can stand in our way. What is your quirk? Dabi inquired. There's no way you're just a simple thrower. Your mask looks like a dragon, and you release puffs of smoke from your mouth, but you just showed me a fireball. This direction was all Kajero said, as he blew a small plume of smoke at Dabi. Dabi's nose scrunched as he inhaled it. He waved at the smoke to dispel it, and when it cleared he tried to shoot back a response, but Kajero already turned the volume back up on the TV, his attention glued to the events, apparently finished with the conversation. Thrown off by the complete lack of a proper conversational flow, Kajero follows. He shook his head and downed the rest of his drink, the liquid burning down his throat. That was a can of worms for future Dabi. Kurogiri, let me get another one. Mustard walked around the stalls that littered UA's grounds, utterly disgusted by what he was seeing, but doing his best to hide it. He dressed in his casual clothes with a simple white t-shirt with blue trim and matching blue shorts. Besides him strolled a teenage girl with a mid-length hair, the same shade as his, wearing a light pink skirt with a hood under a biker-style jacket with long brown boots. She was carrying a small peach-colored purse, swinging it around as she walked with a skip in her step. To everyone else, it just looked like a sister taking her little brother out to the festival. I don't get why we're here, Mustard lamented. It's not like we're actually going to be watching the events go on. The girl giggled and pat his head. Oh, don't be so bummed out. Shai-kun wanted you to get more experience with this sort of stuff. So you get to hang with your favorite big sis all day long. Mustard groaned, but what do we even do? All we've done so far is walk around looking at the stalls. I thought we'd be sneaking around the stadium or school. He was immediately pulled to the side, away from the main crowd. In front of him, the face of the girl whom Toga was impersonating was right in front of him. He felt a knife lightly press itself into his shirt. First things first, Toga started, her voice taking a serious tone. When out on a mission, a stealth and recon mission, you never talk about it. You don't know who could be listening in. She pressed the knife further. Second thing, whatever you think you know about sneaking around from movies or whatever, it's nothing like that. What did you notice when we were walking around just now? Mustard's eyes were filled with fear. He completely misread Toga when he met her a few days ago. He knew that she could be serious, but she's downright terrifying right now. It took a little while for him to realize that she asked him a question, but he was drawing a blank. Toga seemed to pick up on that as well, heaving a large sigh before she withdrew her knife. She stepped back and took a calming breath. If you want to survive, you need to take this seriously. The people here aren't your friends. Heroes aren't, and won't save you. You either live or you die in this world, and how you're acting, you're going to die. Go call Kurogiri, I'll do this myself. Like a switch was flicked, Toga went back to the preppy girl that he met her as. A carefree and deceptively genuine smile plastered on her face as she skipped away to fade into the crowd. Mustard watched her go as he released a breath he didn't realize he was holding. He stayed against the wall he was pushed against as he reined his heart rate in. Exactly what did he get himself into? The UA Sports Festival, a yearly televised event that showcases UA's students. Civilians and pro heroes alike watch the 3-day spectacle in awe as they see the best of the best duke it out in a tournament-style competition. The event is held once a year, spanning 3 days to cover the 3 different years of the students attending. After the advent of quirks, tried as they did, the world could no longer hold the centuries-old Olympics like they used to. Quirks were an unknown and untested factor, and given that some quirks gave people boosts that increased their strength, speed, or stamina, it was deemed unfair to those who were unfortunate enough to develop quirks that gave none of those benefits. Over the years, the Olympics lost its worldwide popularity, and people moved on. Now, at the very least, the citizens of Japan have flocked to watching the UA students beat each other up. For civilians, it was a great way to see the skill of the future heroes that graduated out of the school. They had security in knowing their future was safe and secured. For pro heroes, it was a great way to measure and gauge a student's potential, see if they're worth investing their time and efforts in to mold them into an even better hero. Of course, having the bragging rights of saying you helped mentor some of the newest rising stars is its own rewards. Any child, adult, and even other pro heroes that didn't go to UA, competing in the sports festival would be a dream come true. It would be the absolute best time of their life. Denko Shimura was having the worst time of his life. I can't believe this. Shimura wailed as he looked at the scoreboard. After I talked up such a big game, I come in at 35th place. The few snickers could be heard from the people who finished near him. The blonde from 1B that was glaring the hardest at his class was laughing crazily with his arms spread wide, palms up. So much for Mr. I placed first in the entrance exam. Guess you're not as strong as you thought. Monoma-kun, a quiet girl, spoke up. She had straight black, shoulder-length hair and a bob cut, her face showing a neutral look. He placed ahead of you. Unfazed by the demure girl's comment, Monoma continued his cackles. Shimura sent him the hardest glare he could muster. Everyone that caught a glimpse of it felt a tinge of hostility and turned away, heckles caught in their throats. The classmates that caught it gave sympathetic smiles and waves, all eventually awkwardly looking away. He scratched at his neck before sulking away to the outskirts of the designated area. He didn't want to stand around his friends despite their clear attempts at trying to wave him over. He ignored them in favor of wallowing in his own self-pity. That didn't stop them from trying to reach him. Shimura-kun. Uraraka yelled, her hands cupped around her mouth. Shimura-kun, over here. I could have easily come in the top 15 if not for that rope bridge and pit. You try crossing that thing with only 8 fingers, see how well you do. Only a monkey could do it that easily. Who the hell designed the course anyway? Midnight gave the gathered students a few more moments to catch their breath before moving forward. Only the top 42 from this round gets to move on. If you didn't make it, don't worry. We have some things lined up for you to show off and that'll happen before the final event. But now, on to the next round. Midnight raised her whip into the air and pointed to the jumbotron screen in the stadium. Anyone have any guesses as to what it is? Anyone just dying in suspense? The screen displayed a colorful spinning wheel with all the possibilities. It was going just fast enough so that no one without enhanced perception could read, something that Shimura found annoying. The wheel finally stopped spinning and the screen was filled with cavalry battle spelled out proudly. Shimura couldn't stop the groan that came out of his mouth. The students around him couldn't help but chuckle at his obvious displeasure. The cavalry battle Kaminari trailed off. I wonder how this is gonna work, Zero commented, scratching at the back of his head. Midnight was getting visibly irritated, pointing her whip at the two. "If you give me a little time, I'll explain it to you. Now shut up and don't interrupt me again, or else you'll be paying for it later." Both boys immediately shut their mouths, nodding in understanding. The basic rules of this event are the same as what you're familiar with. You'll form teams of 2 to 4, with 3 horses and 1 rider. This time, only the rider will be wearing a bandana, and if you lose it, you're not out. The big difference is that each of you have been assigned a point value based on how you ranked in the first event. The points start at 5 at the bottom, so 42nd place is worth 5 points, 41st is 10, and so on and so forth. You following? Pop quiz. What's first place is worth, then? One of the more scholarly students raised their hand. "Miss Midnight. I believe they're worth." "That's right." Midnight talked over them. "First place is worth 10 million points." Everybody's attention immediately turned towards the first place winner. Those that were standing near them spread out, giving them a wide berth, so they were standing all on their own. In the middle, a boy with red and white hair split right down the middle, stood. The white side sported a gray eye, while the red side had a bright blue eye with a hideous burn surrounding it. His face sat expressionless, nothing betraying any emotions he may have felt. Midnight's eyes shone with mischief. "As the son of a top pro, you're probably aware of your situation, but for those who aren't, listen up. Those at the top are surrounded by pressure on all sides, so we here at UA are doing what we can to prepare you for the future. You know our motto, right? The match will last 15 minutes. Shimura drowned out the rest of Midnight's explanation, having heard enough to get the gist of the event. "These events are stacked against me. No chance to really showcase my skill, especially in a team-based setting like this. How the hell am I supposed to make it past this round? You have 15 minutes to form your teams," Midnight announced. The portal swirled behind Kajero and Dobby at the bar. Dobby craned his head to see who came through, but Kajero kept his attention to the TV, already knowing who it was. Mustard walked through, no worse than when he left, but with noticeably red eyes, as if he were crying. Dobby looked him over again before smirking. "Oh, did someone's feelings get hurt?" Dobby fake cooed. "What happened, little guy? Get separated from your mommy?" Mustard quickly wiped at any residual tears that remained on his face. "Fuck you." Dobby chuckled. "Whoa, aren't you a little young for using such adult words?" The balled-up napkin hit Dobby in the forehead. "That's enough, Dobby." Kajero had muted the TV, the screen displaying a wide shot of everyone participating in the second round. He was now facing the new arrival, a lazy but sharp eye looking him over. "Why are you here and not with Toga?" Disappointment apparent on his voice. Mustard balled his fists, trying to appear more sure of himself than he felt. "Toga sent me back, said that she wanted to finish the mission on her own. That she works better alone." "Not bad for your first try. Not bad, but could use more work on sticking to it," Kajero slowly replied, his arms crossed, nodding his head. Mustard stilled in confusion. "Thank you. That's basically what Toga said, that's why I'm back here." Dobby was leaned up against the counter, he snickered at Mustard's obliviousness. "That's not what he's talking about, twerp." Mustard looked between Dobby and Kajero, utterly confused. Kajero still looked like he was following exactly what Mustard was saying, but Dobby's snickers were slowly growing into a chuckle. "What is it?" Dobby's laughs were getting on his nerves, and Kajero's silence wasn't helping. He was growing more frustrated the longer both went on. Mustard crossed his arms and was seconds away from stamping his foot before Kajero spoke again. "How are you supposed to learn if you're given all the answers?" Kajero replied, already turning his attention back to the TV. "You've got until the end of the second event to figure it out." Kajero unmuted the TV and swirled his glass before downing the rest. "So Mustard started, what should I do now?" Both Kajero and Dobby gave a lazy wave, a clear dismissal as any. Mustard swallowed and awkwardly walked up to the counter so he too could watch the sports festival. He motioned to Kurogiri for a drink, his finger raised up as he was about to order. Kurogiri cut him off. "Nothing alcoholic." Mustard's finger dropped a little. "I wasn't expecting to get one anyway," he grumbled. "I was going to ask for a smoothie." Kurogiri hummed and started on the drink. Mustard turned his attention to the TV, the screen showing the competitors spread throughout the stadium. They were all bunched in groups of 3 or 4, with someone clearly riding on top. The announcer, whom he identified as Midnight, stood on a platform. "Ready? Begin." Her on-screen counterpart yelled. All but one team rushed forward, either to evade or to attack. The one that stood still had a boy with white and red hair sitting atop. The camera view switched to something a little closer, where Mustard saw the boy sweep his right arm in front of him, a thick layer of ice following its movement. The cavalry battle has begun. Mustard could have walked right through the gate since he was still a normal middle schooler, but Toga couldn't. Kajero warned her that because she was connected to the murder of a classmate, even though she was never caught by the police, they still had access to her face. So there they were, standing in the mouth of an alleyway, looking for a disguise for Toga to don. They didn't have to wait long before they found someone who matched what they were looking for. They stalked the girl until she was in a more deserted area before they pounced. A few minutes of a struggle later, Toga was dressed in the girl's outfit, her features slowly changing to match the bound girl in front of her. She was no longer Himiko Toga, but Sachiko Namba. A second-year student at some public school that was on her way to meet with her friends to watch the sports festival. Toga waved her ticket in the air in triumph before leaning down to lick the blood still dripping from where Toga cut her on the arm. Mustard used his gas on the girl to knock her out before heaving her into a dumpster. Toga hummed happily as she skipped along the grounds, flanked on either side by food or game stalls. She jumped between them all, trying the wide variety of foods available and playing every game until she got bored. Her head was on a swivel, taking note of every lamppost, every security camera posted on a building's corner, every person that was wearing a baggier shirt than the rest whose heads were also on a swivel. Those guys were cops in plain clothes, not very good at hiding in plain sight. Toga made sure to keep a running tally in her head. The man in front of her was wearing jeans with a pastel green short sleeve buttoned down, with a baseball cap that displayed the logo of a hero she didn't recognize. This guy was as easy to spot as the others because she could clearly see the holster that held his .38 caliber, double-action, 5-shot revolver on his hip under his shirt. This guy was number 42. She was also on the lookout for heroes, but they were even easier to spot than the cops, since they were all in costume. She giggled at some of the heroes with a sillier costume and moved on. Ready? Start. She heard Midnight's voice ring out over the stadium speakers, signaling the start of the second round. She picked her pace up a little, trying to find a way into the stadium that had the least amount of coverage. After all, she had a special message to deliver. Her answer came in the form of a loose panel that was partially hidden behind some bushes. The entrance was too good to be true, so Toga looped the area twice before deeming it safe to enter. She quickly dipped behind the bushes, struggling slightly as she pried the panel open further so she could slide through. Once inside, she took extra care to cover her tracks. Moving swiftly and silently through the halls, she used a compact mirror she found in Namba's purse. She peeked the mirror portion around corners, screwing her eyes in concentration to see if there were any cameras that awaited her. The halls of the stadium were a labyrinth, but not winding enough for her to lose her way back. She stalked along quietly, taking note of anything that looked important before she stumbled onto a staircase. Creeping up a few steps to the landing, she heard some voices talking. Next event's the one-on-ones, right? Who do you think will make it to the final round? The first voice asked. That Todoroki kid for sure, and probably the one that has explosions. Did you see what they did? The second voice asked, slightly more animated but definitely more masculine than the first. Endeavor's kid literally skated his way to victory in the obstacle course, and the explosion kids got the fire to win it all. Toga heard the first voice hum before replying, but what about the kid that did the pledge? Shimura. With how he performed, it's a wonder how he placed first in the entrance exam. The other voice laughed as they continued their conversation. Toga waited until their voices slowly died out before reaching the next floor. If there are people patrolling on this level, there's something worth guarding. Access to the student stands. Public area. If there were heroes patrolling, and if it was a public area, Toga didn't want to take any chances. She's been lucky to stay undetected thus far. She shook her head before she went back downstairs to find a room to hide out in until the second event ended. She turned on her phone to the live broadcast of the sports festival, so she knew what was going on. Once the third event started, part 2 of her mission came into play. The screen of her phone showed the camera focusing on a particular student. The camera perfectly caught the intense look in his eyes as he chased down another student, his hand stretching out towards the other's headband. The other student's eyes grew wide as the hand encompassed their head before switching to a different student. Toga giggled quietly in anticipation. The timer on the screen displayed 3 minutes left in the round, and the cameras were catching every intense expression on the competitors' faces. Shimura's team, consisting of the bird-headed Tokoyami, Uraraka, and a girl with pink dreadlocks who boisterously demanded she be called May because saying Hatsune-chan takes too long, started off with a meager 365 points and struggled to get more to add to their pool. Their team had a decent composition, but it was focused more on defense and maneuverability than offense, something that Shimura found grating, but accepted it. Shimura himself was the rider since that position didn't run the risk of accidentally disintegrating his teammates, with Tokoyami as the head horse, Uraraka his left, and Mei his right. With them doing a variety hit and run tactics, they were able to snag a few more headbands, bringing their overall total to somewhere near 1,000 points. Shimura glanced up at the board, ahead of them was Todoroki with his imposing 10,410 points, and Bakugo sitting in second with a respectable 1,360 points. Shimura's team was firmly in third place, with the silver-haired boy Tetsu following in fourth. Torn away from his musing, Shimura was jerked to the side to avoid the swipe of another team. "Shimura-kun." Uraraka yelled from below him, "Are you alright? You're zoning off and we can't keep running forever." Shimura shook his head out as he took in his surroundings. Todoroki had managed to create an ice wall all around them, leaving them with one way out. Through Todoroki's team. To his right and left were other teams who got caught in Todoroki's attack, leaving them frozen in place. Further behind Todoroki, he could see Bakugo's team running up to gather any last-second points. Shimura's gaze fell to Todoroki's glare, so I guess standing still and letting the clock run out isn't an option. Todoroki's glare hardened, it never was. Iida. Through the frosty haze that sat on the tournament grounds, Shimura could see Iida crouching down, his exhaust pipes glowing with heat. Over the roar of the crowd, he could make out the sound of an engine revving, much like drag racers do before immediately taking off down the strip. Recipro Iida started, the exhausts in his legs turning a cherry red as the flames in his legs started to burn hotter. Shimura's eyes widened, realizing what was about to happen. "Uraraka-chan. May. We need to get airborne. Now." Ice flew out from Todoroki, creeping up his teammates' legs, keeping them grounded. "You're not going anywhere, Shimura. Uraraka-chan. Make me float, hurry. But we'll be disqualified if you touch the ground. Then catch me after, I don't care, just get me up." Desperation was starting to leak into Shimura's voice as the chances of moving on grew slimmer the longer they hesitated. "Uraraka." He looked down at Uraraka, pleading with all his might. She met his gaze, her eyes still showing hesitation. "Please. You need to do this now." She paused for a moment longer before she nodded resolutely. She slapped his calf and gave him a boost in the air. Burst. Iida shot forward faster than any of them could register. Uraraka blinked and Todoroki's team was no longer in front of her. She twisted around to where she figured they stopped. In his hand raised high, Todoroki held a headband. The pit formed in her stomach. She was too slow. Breaking her out of her self-deprecation, she noticed that Shimura was no longer right above them. Iida's slipstream caught him and was now slowly but surely hurtling him towards the boundaries of the field, screaming the whole while. "Tokoyami-kun." She yelled, "We have to catch Shimura before he goes out." Tokoyami, having been frozen facing forward, acted immediately. Dark shadow. A dark mass emerged from his stomach, taking the shape of a bird with arms on it. The shadow twisted behind them, stretching impossibly far to grab their ride before he got too far, bringing him back towards the safety of his team. Dark shadow situated Shimura back on top before retreating closer to Tokoyami while Uraraka released her hold on him. The group grunted as they came under his weight again. "Thanks guys," Shimura breathed a sigh of relief. "And that's time." With a nice rider recovery to end it all. President Mick shouted over the speakers, enticing the crowd to roar in applause. "Everyone please turn your attention to the screen to see the final results of this round." The screen blinked before showing the results. In first place, the team that couldn't be stopped. Team Todoroki, who were able to keep the 10 million points the whole time, and then some. In second place, Team Bakugo. In third place, Team Shimura. And finally, in fourth place, Team Team Shinso. What a last-second upset. Todoroki's team stayed at the top with a total of 10,480 points. In second place, Bakugo's team had 1485 points, their score having increased from grabbing more points from the frozen teams. In third came Shimura and his team with 975 points. Ending in fourth place was Shinso's team with 730 points. Present Mick's commentary faded into the background as the mentioned teams all digested the results. They all made it to the next round, a fact that hit Uraraka like a truck. She turned towards Todoroki's team. "Wait. What headband did you grab? I thought for sure you got our big points." Aoi Rozu held the headband up so she could see. Iida-kun was faster than any of us were prepared for. It seems Todoroki-kun missed and ended up grabbing the 70-point headband by mistake. Shimura stared at the screen in shock. "Holy shit. I actually made it to the final round. You guys." He turned to face the rest of his teammates. "I couldn't have done it without you. Thank you, thank you, thank you." Tokoyami had his arms crossed but nodded in acknowledgement, dark shadow appearing briefly to give a thumbs up and what looked like a smile. Mei just waved her hand lazily, preferring to tinker with her support items that got damaged. Uraraka gave him a full-face smile. "But the end of the second round, we'll be having a 1-hour lunch break. Make sure to check out the stalls if you haven't already. We'll catch you afterwards for our recreational activities for those who couldn't make it further. See you there." President Mick finished making his announcements and immediately dropped to a more conversational tone. "Still mic it up, yo racer, you wanna get some food?" Toga put her phone back into her borrowed purse as the stream changed to highlights of the first and second rounds, once again leaving her in the darkness of the room she hid in. Her eyes adjusted to the dark slower than usual, something that she didn't miss, but quickly dismissed it as she wasn't exactly herself at the moment. But the second round over, and at least 2 hours before the final round started, it was time to start phase 2. She hopped off the chair she was sat on and quietly opened the door, peeking through the slimmest of cracks. Once again, she was met with nothing. Quietly opening the door wide enough to enter, she slipped back into the hall, stalking through it as she hopped from cover to cover, pillar to pillar. She made her way back to the staircase she was on before and noticed it was significantly louder than it was before the second round started. This is a public area. She crept up to the landing and paused, keeping her ear open for anything that sounded out of the ordinary. Hearing the constant chattering of people, she quickly ascended the steps, seamlessly weaving herself into the crowds. She easily matched the excitement the crowd was feeling, talking about the rounds with everybody and nobody at once. Having ingratiated herself with another group of girls that looked the same age, she brought up the next topic. "Oh my god, do you think if we're lucky we'll get to eat lunch with the competitors?" The girls all squealed in excitement. One of them, a girl with light blue skin and hair puffy like clouds, spoke up. "I never thought about that. I hope so. Maybe if I'm lucky I'll get the Todoroki boy's number." "Todoroki? No, it's all about that loud blonde with explosions," her friend replied, her black and red hair and twin pigtails swishing side to side as she shook her head. "Nothing beats a bad boy with the skills to back it up." She swooned and pretended to faint. Her friends all laughed at her antics. "What about you, Namba-chan?" the first girl asked. "Who do you have eyes for?" Toga easily came back to the conversation, having been distracted by looking for access to the student stands. "Oh no, you'd make fun of me." She puffed her cheeks in a fake pout. "Oh, come on, don't be like that. There's nothing to be shy about," the pig-tailed girl whined, "unless you're talking about him." Toga picked up on her tone. "Him? Oh, you know. Mr. Shaggy Hair whines a lot." "Him?" Toga looked away, twirling her hair, a light blush dusting her cheeks. "I don't know what you're talking about." The girls she was with all gasped over dramatically, giggling at Toga's obvious crush. "It is him. You're something else, girly." They continued like this until they eventually made their way to the cafeteria, a lot slower than Toga would have liked. When they finally arrived, Toga's eyes never stopped moving. Her head was a radar that looked back and forth, scanning for either of her targets. Eventually she found what she was looking for, the students wearing the bright blue athletic uniforms, their backs turned as they were already on their way out. She scanned the group of students until they landed on target. The side profile showed Shimura, caught up in conversation with Uraraka, Iida and Bakugo, laughing at an unheard joke. The quartet nearly out of sight behind the crowd. A smile that would have been natural on her normal face looked skewed on Namba's, just a hair too wide, something that her friends were quick to point out. "Hey Namba-chan, are you Al?" the cloud-haired girl started but trailed off as she followed her gaze. "Ooh, gonna make your move already? How bold." She pushed Toga forward a few steps, who stumbled but ultimately started walking that way. She turned back and stuck her tongue out to the girls, who stuck theirs out in turn. "You guys get food. I'll catch up." As soon as her back was fully turned, her smile dropped. She deftly weaved through the crowd, picking up her pace so she didn't lose sight of Shimura. 10 meters 7-4. Shimura called out to his friends, smiling as he turned back towards the cafeteria. Toga could see his eyes pass over her, locking on for a second longer than normal, before being dismissed. She smiled inwardly. Way too easy. Shimura was ecstatic. He might not have placed the best in the first round and eked out enough points to come in third in the second, but he still made it to the finals. He was way more successful than he thought he'd be. After the second round, he was quick to get some food, wanting to get in line before they got too long. He all but ran straight to the cafeteria as soon as they were dismissed. Bakugo, Iida and Uraraka eventually found him carefully eating chicken wings. As they all finished their food and were heading back to the field for the recreational events, Shimura decided to hang back. Something felt off, like they were being watched. All things considered, it's not surprising, they were in the middle of a competition and all four of them made it to the final round, but it didn't feel like the normal enjoying from afar. Turning around he scanned the room, scouring to find the source of his discomfort. Nothing stood out. A brown-haired girl was looking at him too, but he dismissed her as one of the enjoyers. He lingered a little longer on her though, she was quite cute. The moment was too short. Someone walked in front, hiding her from view, and she was gone. Shrugging, he turned back, but as he did so, something else caught his eye. At the edge of his vision, he swore he caught a glimpse of toxic green. He paused. He looked around the cafeteria, confirming what cameras he could see. If he saw him, then the cameras did too. Right. He hardened his resolve and planted a foot forward to confirm his suspicions. He took a step forward before he was shoved into one of the many rooms that lined the hallway. The room was pitch black and the door slammed shut behind them. A click sounded a second later, indicating the door was locked. Shimura quickly recovered, moving himself further into the room to create distance. Through the darkness he thought he could make out some desks, a stack of chairs piled up on the side, a few shelves set up across from them. A storage room in all intents and purposes. He cautioned to look behind him and wasn't surprised to find a blank wall facing him. He was trapped. He could barely make out a figure still facing the door, their back towards him, hands still on the handle. They slowly turned around. It was difficult, but he was certain that it was a girl. She looked a few centimeters shorter than him with a slender build. Shimura shut his eyes in a quick prayer. Please let this be like one of those mangas where this is where I become a man. As he slowly opened his eyes, the girl's presence was gone. He immediately took a defensive stance, backing himself up against the wall. With the wall behind him, he only had to worry about what came from in front and to the sides, 3 avenues of attack instead of 4. He forced his breathing to slow, calming himself. He strained his senses, willing his hearing and sight to increase in effectiveness. All sense of time vanished as he waited. You've got decent enough battle sense, Shimura-chan, the girl's voice whispered in his right ear. He immediately swung his left arm across his body, hoping to get a solid hit, but contacted nothing. From behind him the voice spoke out again, a little slow on your feet, though. He aimed a back kick with his right leg at the voice, again contacting with nothing. He growled in frustration. Show yourself, you damn coward. He yelled to the empty room. The lights turned on, momentarily blinding him. He took a kick to the gut, his back slamming against the wall. He weakly swung out an arm, but it was caught. He felt it be rotated and swung upward. His fingers pointed down and his palm facing forward, his arm locked in a painful position. His attacker leveraged his arm, pain coursing through it as he felt his elbow bending further in the wrong direction. Blinking as his eyes finally adjusted to the light, he came face to face with Toga, still disguised as Namba. Is that really how you treat a girl that's coming on to you? She asked, her voice almost purring. Shimura swung his free hand at her face, but she leaned back, catching it in his other. Toga kneed Shimura in the stomach again, grabbing both of Shimura's wrists, pinning them above his head. Shimura felt a knife get pressed on his throat. If you keep going like this, you're gonna make me wanna make you bleed even more, she giggled. He felt the pressure of the knife increase before she withdrew it. She let him go and stepped back a few steps. Shimura clutched at his stomach, already feeling bruises forming underneath his shirt. He stayed leaned up against the wall, eyeing Toga carefully. What do you want? Toga smiled, her mouth growing a little wider as she let the disguise drop a smidge. Shai-kun wanted me to tell you something. Despite the circumstances, Shimura scoffed. Shai-kun? Who the hell are you talking about? Who are you? Shai-kun. You know, green hair, dreamy green eyes. All Toga's demeanor immediately changed, her eyes taking on the toxic green he'd grown afraid of, looking him up and down. Before long she returned to normal, her arms spread open as if she finished the best performance of a lifetime. Shai-kun. Shimura stilled, having figured out exactly who she was talking about. Shimura felt his hands raise as he scratched at his throat, trying to use that to ground him, but all it did was make him more anxious. What do you want? Shimura gasped out, his scratching intensifying. Are you here to kill me? To finish the job? The girl giggled, her left hand brought up to hide her laugh. Of course not, silly. Shai-kun just wanted me to say that he's rooting for you. And should you ever feel dissatisfied, that he'd be willing to lend an ear. Shimura felt his fingers dig a little deeper. He pulled his hands away, seeing the tips dyed in blood. Quicker than he could react, Toga was on him, her tongue lapping up some of the blood before retreating. He recoiled at the feeling. She swooned at the taste. Ooh oh, you're sweet. Kinda like Shai-kun, but he's sweet like fruit. You're sweet like candy. Shimura was too shocked to respond. You've been gone too long, people might get suspicious. I can't wait to see you again, Shimura-chan. Even though Shimura was staring right at her, it was as if she disappeared into thin air. No portal swallowed her up, the door didn't open and close, it was as if she never existed. She was there one moment and gone the next. Humming to his senses, he plowed out of the room, running straight to the announcer's box where he prayed President Mick and Eraserhead were. People scurried to get out of his way, sounds of surprise following him. Finding the door locked, he pressed all 5 fingers on the handle, reducing it and the locking mechanism to dust. Kicking the door open, he found it as he expected the box to look like, save for a lone sheet of paper on the table. Before he could read what it said, he heard a voice behind him. Shimura-kun. What are you doing here, little listener? What's wrong? President Mick questioned. Shimura breathed a sigh of relief, but wordlessly raised the paper up so his teacher could read it. On it was a single sentence, signed with a lipstick kiss. Kajiro Shigaraki says good luck to the finalists. The league was here was all Shimura could say before promptly fainting. President Mick rushed forward, catching Shimura before he hit the ground. Shimura-kun. Mick reached up to Shimura's neck for a pulse. It was still there, a little weak, but steady. He laid Shimura down softly on the ground, momentarily leaving him be as he reached for the lone phone in the booth. He pulled the phone off the receiver, it already dialing the preset number. It didn't even get through a full ring before he heard another voice on the other end. "Yamada-kun." The voice answered, chipper as ever. "I hope the sports festival has been moving along smoothly. Event-wise, it's going off without a hitch, which is rockin'." Mick easily replied, "But we have a situation that requires some advisement, principal." Both off and on the job, it's very rare for Present Mick to take on such a serious tone. He much rather prefers to be upbeat and positive, as he's found that it generally helps people calm down after a harrowing event. Even rarer does he, or anyone really, use Nezu's hero name. The major shift in tone and grammar Present Mick employs when he's in one of his moods is enough to sober up even the most laid-back of heroes. "Acknowledged. Give me the situation, I'm pulling the footage now," the principal replied, down to business immediately. Present Mick nodded, knowing at this point the principal is already watching through his multiple cameras, trying to get a handle on the situation. "I returned from my lunch break and found the door to the announcer's booth open. Upon investigating I found Shimura-sen in it. When I asked what was going on, he showed me a piece of paper that read Kajiro Shigaraki says good luck to the finalists that was signed by a kiss. He then relayed the league was here to me before fainting. We have been infiltrated by at least one hostile, most likely female, and aligned with the League of Villains. Should we cancel the festival or proceed as planned?" Present Mick stayed crouched on the floor, hovering near Shimura as he awaited guidance. "Proceed as planned," the principal answered eventually. "If we move towards a code 3 and red alert, we'd be causing far more harm than good. We have a high volume of people within our grounds, if we raise the alarm, we'd be inducing chaos that doesn't and shouldn't happen. How should we proceed?" "You said Shimura-san fainted. Find a replacement to cover for your absence and bring him to Recovery Girl. I assume he is our first contact." "It appears so, yes. Bring him to Recovery Girl for the time being. I'm going through the footage now. You said that you just came back from your lunch break, so I assume the league made themselves known within the past 45 minutes at the minimum. Stay with Shimura-san until he wakes up." "Yes sir." Present Mick hung up the phone and folded the note before placing it into one of his many jacket pockets. He crouched back down and scooped Shimura back into his arms, turning around to exit the room. On his way out, Eraser had turned the corner, nursing a cup of coffee in one hand and the other in his pocket. He came to an abrupt stop, taking in Shimura's unconscious form in Present Mick's arms. "Mick. What happened?" "We've been infiltrated. The principal instructed me to take Shimura-san to Recovery Girl and to find a substitute announcer." Present Mick tersely responded. He continued walking, but stopped a few steps behind Eraserhead. He also said to keep the sports festival going. Without waiting for a response, Present Mick walked off. Eraserhead cursed before raising a hand to his ear, activating the comm link that was always present. "This is Izawa. I need another teacher up in the announcer's box with me. We have a situation and Present Mick will apparently be unavailable for the near future." He sat back down in his chair, taking a big sip of his coffee before he got a response. "Ectoplasm," the comm crackled, "I'll send a clone to you." "Copy." Eraserhead slouched further into his chair as he waited for his new companion, grumbling the whole while about how nobody listens to him. "Why does Mick get to leave? This is literally what he does, and even though I can understand the logic behind it, why aren't we cancelling this?" He dug into his pocket and pulled out a jelly packet, opening it with one hand and quickly emptying the contents before tossing the container in the trash. "I don't get enough respect around here." The principal was perplexed. While not certain, as many things rarely are, he was confident that with the updates to security and increase in number of heroes and police walking the grounds, any potential threat could be dealt with quickly and decisively. He was aware that despite the precautions taken, there would always be a blind spot in the security, whether that be due to human or mechanical error. He was even aware that there were indeed convicted criminals walking amongst the crowds also enjoying the festivities. At the push of a button, he could have all 357 criminals pinched and their exact whereabouts sent to the nearest hero or police officer that was spread throughout the grounds. He wouldn't do that, of course, because they have yet to commit any crimes, but he still had the ability to do so. What he didn't have the ability to do, however, was find who the league sent, where they were/are, when they made themselves known, and how they bypassed every camera and personnel. He shortly entertained the idea of the intruder being invisible like the expressive and mischievous Toru Hagakure and toggled the camera views between infrared, ultraviolet, and X-ray vision, but found that to be a fruitless endeavor. The sheer amount of people present made it extremely difficult to discern one individual from another. Kurajiri, the warp quirk user, was a thought as well, but he dismissed it just as quickly. They might not currently have a countermeasure for his portals, but they did against physical entities. Even if they chose to enter in a secluded part of the forest surrounding the grounds or in one of the more isolated gyms, the second the intruder set foot on the ground, a sensor would have triggered and a staff member alerted. The response to the intruder might be delayed, but at that point, the intruder would have already been tagged and tracked. He took a sip of his tea, sighing at the pleasant taste. As the principal sat back in his chair, mulling over the problem, he found himself recalling the words of an author from long before the age of quirks came about. Once you eliminate the impossible, whatever remains, however improbable, must be the truth. He mused aloud, you walked in right through the front gates, in plain view of everything. With renewed vigor, he changed the scope of his search. Instead of looking for someone suspicious, he was now looking for someone that was normal. Someone that fit in a little too well. He thought back to President Mick's rushed report. President Mick said he came back from his lunch break and found Shimura in the announcer's booth, along with a note. This brought a few instances on when and where he would be able to identify the intruder. The first was when they entered to leave the note. The second was when they came into contact with Shimura, whenever that happened. Confirming the note should be easy enough. He saw President Mick and Shimura's actions in reverse and continued watching through. Once the room was empty again, 2 minutes before, the note suddenly appeared on the table. The principal paused, rewound, and played it back again, twice as slow. The feed slowly made its way to when the note appeared, the principal's eyes scanning everything down to the individual pixels to see any evidence of tampering. He pored over the short moment multiple times before seeing it. The shadows made by the microphones were slightly longer than they should be after the note appeared. The principal's mouth formed a thin line. This does not bode well in the slightest. Wanting to be thorough, he went through up to when President Mick and Eraser had exited the room. The display didn't change as he went further back. The only indication the feed wasn't frozen was the very minute movement of the shadows going east to west. He eventually made it back to the point when President Mick and Eraserhead's backs entered the room. He rewound all the way to when lunch break started and nothing looked out of place. He clicked his tongue in annoyance and moved on. There was nothing else he could gather for the note. Moving on to Shimura's side of the story, the principal retraced his path before making it to the booth through the cameras. Minutes before, he found when Shimura burst out of a storage room on the second floor of the stadium. Going back a little further, he found something interesting. The principal moved to a closer camera and watched the scene play out, and who might you be? The camera quality was excellent, but much to the principal's dismay, none of the cameras had a good shot of her face. He watched as Shimura get shoved into the room by a brown-haired girl. He quickly flicked through the cameras until he found the one inside the room, but again, the girl's face was hidden from view. Moving back to the camera in the hallway, he fast-forwarded to before Shimura ran out, trying and failing to find when the girl left the room. He stayed on the camera well after Shimura was gone. The feed didn't show the girl exit. Too focused on the door, the principal missed the very subtle jump in the feed, a faint shadow receding into the top of the camera's frame. Abandoning this path, he shifted to following the girl's tracks. Attempting to follow the girl through the cameras proved difficult. There were multiple times when she was visible, but every time she came up, her face was somehow always obscured. Other times, he would lose her entirely until he eventually found her in a completely different location. Eventually, he found the moment her ticket was scanned and her face displayed in full view. He froze the feed, bringing up her face, so it was in full view on his screen. He ran the algorithm power loader created, letting his computer think before the results came back. The computer dinged, signaling it was finished. He took another sip of his tea before pausing. Well, that doesn't make sense now, does it? The bell jingled as the door to the bar opened. The occupants all turned their heads, curious to see who the new arrival was. A head peeked in the frame, mid-length brown hair framing her smiling face before the rest of her body followed. Dabi eyed the girl lazily, while Kurogiri visibly tensed at the sudden entrance of the newcomer. She walked up to the bar, arms swinging exaggeratedly before seating herself at the bar. Kurogiri recovered enough to compose himself as the bartender and host and provided her with a coaster, a glass of water followed a moment later. Dabi eyed her suspiciously, while Kijiro sat in silence, his head tilted in clear thought. The air became thick with suspense, to the point of it being near suffocating before she finally caved, is no one going to say welcome back? At once, everything clicked for Kijiro. Ah, Toga. Sorry, we didn't recognize you. Dabi rolled his eyes and grumbled. Kurogiri relaxed minutely, still a little wary of her. Toga pouted, puffing her cheeks out, what do you mean you didn't recognize me? She cut herself off, catching a glimpse in the mirror settled behind the glasses for the bar. Oh, I'm not me. Toga's disguise as Namba slowly turned to grey sludge. As it slowly fell off her frame, her blonde hair and messy twin buns became visible, golden, cat-like eyes shone dimly. The sludge kept falling to the floor, Kurogiri gave an audible sigh as he looked over the mess he'd have to clean. As more sludge fell from her body, everyone averted their eyes, realizing she wasn't wearing anything under. "Geez, Toga. Don't you have any shame?" Dabi whined, his head turned up and away from her. "Imagine if Mustard were still here." Kurogiri produced a bath towel from behind the bar and handed it to Toga, who wrapped it around her, letting the remaining sludge either fall completely to the floor or get caught up in the towel. "Simply fascinating. I wonder if the sludge is fresh enough and we have enough of the material, we could synthesize a clone of the person Toga took blood from," Kajero muttered. Everyone turned to look at him, Kurogiri quickly realizing he probably watched the entire transformation happen, regardless of what was shown. Kajero Shigaraki, Kurogiri quickly admonished. "I understand your fascination for quirks, but there are limits to what you can do, even as a villain." Kajero had enough sense to look slightly embarrassed, averting his eyes down to the floor, but only just, "Sorry." Toga turned away from everyone, wrapping her arms around herself as she held the towel tighter, hiding her blush as she caught on to what Kurogiri was hinting at. Dabi watched as the bar lapsed into an awkward silence, smirking at the two's antics. He was about to speak up, teasing the two before Kajero beat him to it. "So, Toga, seeing as you're back, I assume you were successful." Dabi gawked. He was hoping to drag on the awkwardness for as long as possible, always ready to sow what small seeds of mischief he could, but Kajero recovered way too quickly. Toga softly replied, still not fully facing everyone, was able to deliver the message, and then some. "Oh?" Kajero responded, curiosity obviously piqued. Toga nodded, her side profile now facing the group. She dug into her towel for something, causing Dabi to groan and turn away again. Kajero watched until he felt a thump on his head, he looked at Kurogiri who gave him a disapproving look. He huffed and turned away as well. "I got this little sample from Shimura-chan," calling attention back to herself. She was holding a little vial of blood, containing barely enough to fill a pipette. "I looked for him as instructed and was able to swipe some blood. He made it really easy too." "It was the neck scratching thing, right?" Kajero guessed, holding his hand out for the vial. "Yep." Toga replied, popping the pea as she handed the vial over. Seemed like she was finally getting over her embarrassment. "When I cornered him, he started scratching his neck hard enough to bleed, it was so pretty. I even got to taste a little bit." Kajero held the vial up to the light, the blood slowly moving as he turned it over. "This is incredible. Good work, Toga. I'll have to pass this off to the doctor for holding. I don't know what to do with it yet, but I know it'll come in handy." Toga gave a wide smile, nodding her head up and down. "I believe we can continue this chat later," Kurogiri intervened. "Toga, please go put on some clothes. This is still an actual running bar, we don't want to attract any undue attention should a real customer come in." "Okay." She hopped off her stool, bare feet plopping in the sludge, leaving a trail behind her. Seeing the mess increase, Kurogiri silently moved into the back room to grab a mop. Kajero and Dabi were left in the bar, both looking at the TV, but not really watching the recreational games go down. One oblivious to the elephant in the room, the other unwilling to let it go. He saw Kajero take a long sip of his drink before speaking up. So Dabi drawled, "Did you enjoy the show?" Kajero grunted as he felt the alcohol burn his throat. "What? No one cares about the recreational games. They're no different than any other sports festival." Dabi chuckled. Despite being so observant, Kajero really is as blind as a bat. "Yep. Cause that's what I was talking about." Kajero picked up on the tone, eyes narrowing. Sarcasm was something he easily identified. "What would you be talking about if not for the festival?" "Nothing, nothing. Just forget it." Dabi propped his head on his arm, lazily sliding his glass side to side with his left hand. Kajero said nothing, mentally picking apart the short conversation to figure out what Dabi was getting at. The door that leads further into the bar opened again, revealing Toga dressed in her normal sailor uniform and oversized cardigan. "I'm back," she announced. "Kurogiri, can I get a Shirley Temple, with extra red?" "Of course, Toga-san." "A moment please," called out from behind the bar, putting away his cleaning supplies. Toga swiveled in the bar stool, looking between Dabi who was snickering silently and Kajero who was still lost in his thoughts. "Hey guys, where's Mustard?" Shimura opened his eyes, taking in the lights in the high domed ceiling above him. As the fog in his head cleared and his vision slowly adjusted, they opened wide in shock. He bolted upright and found himself in the middle of the pavilion at the USJ. All around him were jeering villains, taunting him with every insult imaginable, slowly forming a tight circle around him. He tried to break out of the ring but was harshly shoved back in. In desperation he grabbed at the leg of one of the closer villains, all 5 fingers closing on their ankle. He could see the villain jolt with pain, letting out a short scream before disintegrating entirely. The decay spread from the first villain onto the next, who similarly was reduced to ashes. One by one, slowly picking up pace, the decay that started on one villain spread, taking out every single one of them. Shimura gaped at the horror, a terrible mix of blood and guts and ash pooled all around him. He stared at the floor, watching the refuse combine and flow until it was touching his shoes. He knelt down, staring at the warped reflection of himself in the puddle. He could barely make out his features, but as his face got closer the image rippled, now changing into the disturbing face of the Nomu. Shimura startled, jumping back but hitting something solid behind him. He slowly turned around, coming face to stomach with the Nomu. He immediately swept his hand at the Nomu, only for it to grab it again. He braced himself for the pain, but was lifted up in the air. The Nomu swung him around, his back hitting a wall, his arm pinned above his head. The scene shifted to the storage room he found himself in earlier, but instead of the girl he came face to face with Kojiro, his green eyes piercing into his red. He felt the grip on his pinned hand tighten, the sensation a few steps below what he experienced from the Nomu, as Kojiro brought his face closer. "Are you sure you want to be a hero, Shimura-chan? How's the little listener looking?" Mick asked, worry evident in his voice. An old woman, wearing a slightly too long lab coat over a yellow and red vest and pink boots with her grayed hair up in a high bun, hopped off her stool where she was sat, quickly referencing her notes before replying, "No sign of any physical injuries, no head trauma, glucose levels looking normal, he's perfectly healthy. At this point, all we can do is wait until he comes to again." President Mick nodded numbly, fully aware that Shimura wasn't in danger anymore, but he still couldn't shake the feeling something was wrong. The older hero, recovery girl, studied him before nodding to herself. "What do you think of the student so far?" President Mick shot her a smile, appreciating the blatant distraction. "Oh, the little listeners are absolutely killing it. They're doing so good. Todoroki-kun has been dominating the competition with Bakugo-kun right on his heels. And then there are the absolute underdogs, like Shinso-kun and his team. They came out of nowhere in the second event. But I'm most excited for the final event. There are a lot of scrappers this year in Izawa's class alone. Did you see the lineup? 12 of the 16 that made it to the final round are 1A. Can you believe it? I'm more relieved there haven't been any major injuries yet," she tutted, whose brilliant idea was it to put 0-pointers, a chasm, and a minefield in one event. Recovery girl present Mick shushed, arms waving all around, "He'll hear you. I'm not scared of Nezu. He knows that without me he wouldn't get away with half of the things he does," she quickly retorted. "And for that, I am forever grateful," one of the speakers spoke up, Nezu clearly keeping tabs on the situation. "How is Shimura-kun doing?" Recovery girl scoffed, "As if you don't already know." But before recovery girl could give her report again, movement caught President Mick in hers eye. Shimura tossed a little before sitting up straight, screaming in pain as he clutched at his hand. President Mick immediately flung himself to Shimura's left, trying to calm him down, while recovery girl flanked his right side, appraising his hand. "Whoa there, little listener," President Mick started, "you're safe here. It's President Mick, your favorite hero. Recovery girl is here too, by the way." "They were here. I saw him." Shimura gasped out, his head whipping around as if he were searching for something. "I know I did." And Shimura groaned in pain as his hand flared up again, "And there was this girl and whoever was here, they're long gone now. You can count on it," President Mick stated. It was a poor move on his part and he knew it. As soon as the words left his mouth, President Mick knew he made a mistake. You never bring up a potential trigger to someone, especially if it was the direct cause for the problem. He internally winced as Shimura started to freak out even worse. Shimura's breath started to increase in frequency, becoming more erratic. He started to hyperventilate as his eyes bugged out as he renewed his frantic search. "How can you be so sure? They were here. They were in the cafeteria, in the announcer's booth, in the building, in the..." "Deep breaths, little listener, deep breaths," President Mick consoled, cutting him off before he could spiral any further. President Mick set himself a little closer to Shimura, exaggerating his breaths and slowly tapping on the bed's railing so Shimura could follow. "Breathe in, tap, 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 breathe out, tap, tap, tap." Shimura slowly quieted, focusing more on President Mick's breathing and tapping than anything else. He was aware recovery girl was in the room fussing about, but he couldn't spare her anything more than a passing glance. They fell into a spell of relative silence, the only sounds were the exaggerated breaths, one steady and strong, while the other slowly changing from haggard and wild to quiet and calm. Once he felt grounded again, Shimura was the first to break the silence. "Did you really call yourself my favorite hero?" President Mick squawked, "Why, I am offended. How could I not be your favorite? I'm funny, likable, approachable. I could keep going on, don't tempt me. I won't stop until you say I am." Shimura chuckled lightly. President Mick gave a small smile, silently saying he's happy he's feeling better. Shimura gave him a smile back, still not fully looking up, but his intentions were clear as day. Recovery girl took the lapse in conversation as her cue, handing a glass of water to Shimura. "Are you feeling alright, dearie? Any dizziness? Hard time focusing? Headache?" Nothing of the like, Shimura hummed, taking a sip of the water. My hand is a little sore, but that's it. I noticed you were clutching your hand when you woke up, she nodded. I didn't want to touch you earlier to check it out. Do you mind if I do now? Shimura nodded, raising his hand up for inspection. She turned it this way and that, asking him to flex and relax, ball it up and open again, stick one finger out at a time. Once she was done, she handed him a tongue depressor. Go ahead and use your quirk on this, she instructed. He nodded and did as he was told, holding it with 4 fingers before pressing down his pinky. The wooden stick instantly decayed. She concluded, I'm not seeing anything wrong with your hand, dearie. Then why does my hand hurt sometimes? My best guess is your experience phantom pains. Phantom pains? I thought you only get those when you get a limb amputated. It has been described as that way, yes, she nodded, but there are also instances where those that have some form of post-traumatic stress felt pain at their point of injury when they were reminded of it. The simplest explanation of this is when you witness a man getting kicked in the groin. Immediately, both present Mick and Shimura's faces cringed at the picture. Exactly that. It's inevitable that it's happened to you at some point, and when something reminds you of that instance, you feel that same pain, or a version of it. With regards to your hand, I'm assuming that whenever you think of the USJ, whether it be of the Nomu, Shigaraki, or just the event in general, your mind is reliving that pain. So you're saying I just have to live with that pain? I wouldn't phrase it as that, but it is something that you will need to address moving forward. I know for a fact that Izawa and Nezu are trying to set your class up with some preliminary meetings with Hound Dog to help you process the USJ. Shimura sat quietly, thinking over the new information. He looked at his hand, completely healed yet still hurting. Will I still be able to compete in the festival? Recovery girl sighed in exasperation, but present Mick cut her off, glancing at the clock. There are still 40-ish minutes left in the recreational games. You should just spend the rest of the time here, but before that, you will need to tell us what happened. Shimura's mood dropped significantly. I'm not going to rush you into it, and I'm not saying you do it right this instant, but the sooner you get it done the better. Nezu has no doubt already gotten what he could, so we can wait a little until you're feeling up to it. If I answer his questions, can I still compete? Shimura directed his question to Recovery Girl instead. Recovery Girl's eyebrow raised, only if you promise to rest here until the 15-minute warning. Shimura nodded resolutely. Present Mick looked flabbergasted. Did you just bargain your way back into the festival? When he received nod, he took a second to recover. Once he did, he took a more serious look. Are you sure you're up to it? I don't want to push you too far or anything. Shimura shrugged, it's fine, nothing too bad happened anyway. Recovery Girl and Present Mick shared a look, not liking how quickly Shimura bounced between moods. A casual dismissal of an event that caused him to pass out like that doesn't bode well for his state of mind, but it's something that can be dealt with in a more comfortable sense. Alright then, but feel free to stop or take a break whenever you need. Present Mick acquiesced. Recovery Girl, can I borrow a pen and paper? Present Mick settled himself more comfortably in the chair, flipping to a clean page. When he was ready, he gave Shimura a nod. So where do you want to start? Shimura asked. The nerd's been gone a long time now. When Shimura ditched and left him with round face and glasses, Bakugo thought nothing of it. He might have been all smiles when talking, but he could see something simmering just below the surface. The nerd had that look in his eyes that said he needs to go think about something. Having long since learned that he prefers to be alone when he gets in those moods, Bakugo brushed it off as normal. As time kept creeping and there was no sign of him, that's when the faintest whispers of worry started creeping. The nerd's thought walks always went a little long, but there was no way he'd knowingly miss the festival. Even if it was as boring as the recreational games, he would have still made an effort to watch it. After all, it is UA, and even normal games can become something way cooler. As if his thoughts were on display, Glasses had to speak up. I wonder what happened to Shimura-kun. He's been gone for quite a while. Yeah, I wonder what he got up to. Round face added on, her pointer finger brought up to her chin. Hey Bakugo-kun, do you know where he went? Bakugo scoffed, why do you think I know where the nerd went? I'm not his babysitter. I just figured he might have told you or something. You were there when he left. Round-faced Bakugo rolled his eyes. You heard the same thing I did. Well yeah, but you two always seem to know everything when it comes to each other. So I thought you might know more. Indeed. Glasses cut in, it's pretty evident you two knew each other before coming to UA. Bakugo groaned, regretting giving the nerd's new friends a chance. I'm not telling you shit about how we know each other. Do you wanna know? Ask him. He paused to gauge their reactions. Neither of them looked put off by his outburst, just looking like they were expecting elaboration, much to his dismay. The nerd's probably out thinking. He gets into his head sometimes and just wanders. Glasses nodded along, ah, I see. He's probably nervous about facing off against Shinso-kun. He is the first fight in the 3rd round, after all. Boo. Shinso-kun. Round face exclaimed, the kid from Gen Ed that declared war on us a few weeks ago. Don't tell me you forgot about him. Bakugo gave her a blank look despite knowing exactly who they were talking about. There was no way he'd forget anyone who had enough balls to declare war, especially on him. Bakugo would crush everyone in the competition regardless, but now he has to make sure to crush eyebags even more for thinking he could stand in the same ring as him. No idea who you're talking about, he replied flatly. Don't know why you're worried about the nerd when you should be worried about yourself. Bakugo let loose a few sparks in his hands to emphasize his point, but round face didn't back down. She faced him head on, eyes filled with determination, but her wobbly smile betraying her, why would I be worried about winning? Bakugo barked out a laugh but didn't reply. He turned his attention back to the games, watching the extras try so hard in these was actually hilarious. I wonder what happened to Mick-sensei, Dun's face mused aloud. That caught Bakugo's attention. He looked towards the announcer's box trying to see what he meant but couldn't see in. He listened to the commentary and was surprised to hear someone else. He couldn't help himself, the fuck. Isn't this like basically Loudmouth's job? Where'd he go? So now two things weren't adding up. First the nerd disappears and stays missing, then the guy who does commentary for a living doesn't actually do his job. Something isn't right. Bakugo stood abruptly, making for the aisle, but Shitty Hair caught his arm, where you headed Bakubro? Bakugo yanked his arm free. Shitty Hair took the comment in stride, well alright. Can you get me some snacks on your way back? Bakugo thought for a second, no. Out in the main area, Bakugo noticed that something was different. There was a weird tension in the air that he couldn't place. Some people had their fingers up to their ears and were walking with purpose. The heroes he could see all looked just as serious instead of the faked carelessness you see on patrols. It was honestly astounding how everybody else just completely missed the signs that something was obviously wrong. Heroes weren't as happy, the tension was getting thick enough to cut with a knife, and Present Mick, who hosts a talk radio show and loves talking, isn't talking in one of Japan's biggest events. What the fuck did you do this time, nerd? The phone rang twice before it was picked up on the other side. Principal Nezu, I wasn't expecting to hear from you so soon. I hope everything is alright. Tsukauchi asked. In a manner of speaking, yes. Nezu replied, courteous as ever, however, we've had a series of events that are most unpleasant. The League. Tsukauchi phrased it less of a question and more of a factual statement. There wasn't a hint of a doubt in his voice, something Nezu appreciated. Were there any casualties? No, but we may have identified one of their members. There was a pause on the other line, well that's both a good and bad thing. Do you at least have them in custody? Unfortunately, no. The intruder was very good at sticking to our blind spots. They presumably left, but if they were able to come in undetected, I wouldn't be surprised if they left undetected as well. However, I was able to get a description of them. Why didn't you start with that? Because she is currently at Musatafu General for acute chemical inhalation. She was admitted shortly before the festival even started. Shit. That opens up a whole new set of problems we'll have to deal with. Okay, give me her name and I'll follow up on that lead. Did they do anything else while on the premises? Nothing that we can't handle. Shimura-kun encountered them. He's uninjured, but he did faint and is currently being looked at by a recovery girl. It is my understanding that Present Mick has already gathered his side of the story. I'll have to let Toshinori know about that as well. No, detective, I'll tell him. This happened under my watch. It is only fair I break the news. Tsukauchi sighed, I'll leave you to that, then. Who was your supposed intruder? Tsuchiko Namba, a second-year student at Tsufuro High School. Shall I let the hospital know you are on the way? Despite the circumstances, Tsukauchi snorted. It was just like Nezu to be the perfect mix of order and chaos. No, thank you. I'll do that. I'll update you once I speak with her. I look forward to your call. Nezu hung up the phone, spun around and hopped off his chair. He clasped his paws behind his back as he gazed out of his window, appreciating the calmness of the city despite the excitement happening in the stadium below. He wondered how long it'll last now that truly horrendous villains are starting to make their moves. A soft knock was heard on the hospital door before it was slid open. Tsukauchi was stood in the doorway with his hat off, covering his breast in a slight bow. Pardon the intrusion, I was told by the nursing staff I could find Sachiko Namba here. Tsukauchi greeted. Sat up on the bed was Namba, the real one, awake but still slightly dazed. Dressed in a hospital gown with her brown hair looking flat. Sat on the chair. Present in the room was an older woman, clearly her mother. She had elbow-length brown hair and a low ponytail, wearing a long-sleeved V-necked shirt with a strip of black following the collar and light blue jeans. I didn't know we were expecting guests, the mother replied. My apologies, I probably should have introduced myself first. Tsukauchi bowed again. I am Detective Namasa Tsukauchi with the police, on temporary assignment with the Musatafu police station. I was wondering if I could ask your daughter some questions regarding the situation with which she found herself here. I see. My name is Hitomi Namba. Hitomi turned to look at Sachiko. Are you alright with answering his questions? Sachiko nodded but didn't reply. Tsukuachi gave them both a nod before moving to make himself more comfortable. Hitomi did the same as she moved to sit on the bed, squeezing her daughter in support. I'll try to keep this as brief as possible. Namba-san, are you aware of the circumstances surrounding your daughter's hospitalization? She shook her head, not the full story, I was only told she was found unconscious and brought in. The tests the doctors ran said that they found trace amounts of an unidentifiable substance in her blood. She said this with air quotes, I know she doesn't do drugs, so that didn't make sense to me. What exactly is this about? Tsukauchi nodded, jotting down notes. He raised his head to look Hitomi in the eye, choosing to rip the band-aid off now. We believe your daughter was ambushed and attacked by villains. Hitomi blanched and hugged her daughter tightly, tears starting to form. Sachiko hugged back, still not saying a word. Will she be alright? She isn't a target, is she? Hitomi started to rapid-fire questions at Tsukauchi, who could only answer and placate where possible. We don't believe her or your family to be in any immediate danger, but we are willing to place you in temporary protective custody to ensure there won't be any retaliation or follow-ups. This seemed to calm both of them down, but their worries still plastered on their faces. Tsukauchi allowed them a little time to find their bearings before continuing. Why me? Sachiko quietly asked. Tsukuachi gave her a reassuring smile, that's what I was hoping you could help me figure out as well. Sometime later, Tsukauchi walked out of the hospital, his little notepad tucked into one of his jacket's inside pockets. He looked up in the sky, the sun still shining brightly. Over the sounds of the city, he could just barely make out the roar of the crowd still watching the sports festival, no doubt the third event had already begun. He made a mental note to find the recordings later and watch it back. Still under the hospital's awning, he pulled out his phone and dialed Nezu. It rang once before it was picked up. Detective. Nezu greeted, wonderful to hear from you again. How did your talk go? I've got good news and bad news, Tsukauchi reported. The bad news is that Namba is a dead end. It was most likely a one-off attack and she's completely clean, no connection with the League at all. She was on her way to the festival when she was attacked and has no memory of what happened between getting off the train and walking a few blocks up until she awoke in the hospital. Nezu hummed, that is most unfortunate. And you're certain that she was in the hospital the entire time? Positive. According to the staff, she was unconscious until maybe an hour before I arrived. Then that means the intruder is either a body double, a clone of sorts, an impersonator, or a shapeshifter. Any one of those options will prove to be very troublesome when trying to find the original face. What is Namba's quirk? Good fortune, a passive quirk that makes her slightly luckier than the average person. That eliminates Namba as our intruder. It is extremely ironic that she came under such ill circumstances, though. Ironic and extremely fortunate, actually. Pardon the pun, Tsukuachi chuckled. The doctors ran tests to see if they could figure out why she was unconscious and found something in her blood. When she woke up again, they tested again to see if anything changed and they said the amount of the substance still present should have kept her down for much longer. The concentration of whatever it was that was used was a few steps short of fatal. Nezu's expression turned grim hearing this. What about the good news? Tsukauchi cringed at his response. I was actually leading into that. They reported the substance as unidentifiable, meaning it didn't line up with any of the standard chemicals or drugs that are generally used to render someone unconscious. 9 times out of 10, when they can't identify the substance, it's believed to be quirk-based. In his office, Nezu's ears quirked in excitement at the news. If it's quirk-based, then we have a better chance at finding them. Did the hospital keep a sample of it? Tsukauchi noted the change in Nezu's tone and hurriedly wrote down a note to check. I'm not certain, but I can go ask. I haven't left yet. Yes, please do so. Do you have anything more to add? Assuming Namba was attacked by someone with a poison quirk and she was confirmed to be at the hospital in the time frame you're working with, I don't believe them and your intruder to be the same person. We may be looking at more than one intruder, which means Tsukauchi trailed off. The League is recruiting, Nezu finished. This time they're adding villains that are good at their jobs. Thank you, detective. You've given me a lot to think about. Tsukauchi sighed, I'm sorry I couldn't give you anything more. I'll keep you updated as things progress, however. Not at all, Detective, Nezu consoled, you have given me much insight into the matter. I just hope that we won't be too late in putting a stop to this before more people get involved, both innocent civilians and new villains. A hero clad in white armor came down from the air, jets of air pouring out of exhaust pipes on their elbows, blowing as they slowed the hero's descent. His armor most notably having a protruding V starting at his collarbone and helmet having a horn-like shape. On his left shoulder the letters ING were clearly visible. I found him. He proclaimed, the hero killer. Stain paused, his back half turned so he can get a look at the hero, Ingenium. Eldest son of the Iida family, current head of Team Idaten. Ingenium fell into a wary battle stance. It seems my reputation precedes me. Sorry, but you gotta forgive me if I'm not as friendly right now. Turning his back on Ingenium, he started to make his way out of the alley. Stain quietly growled out a response, I have no quarrel with you, Ingenium. Leave. Your string of murders ends here, Stain. You're surrounded and have nowhere to go. You have crimes to answer for, Stain. Stain stopped walking, and I will answer for them as soon as my job is finished and my dream a reality. If you don't surrender right now, I will be forced to engage. I don't want to fight you, but I will if you resist. Stain heard the metal of Ingenium's armor shift. Before, Ingenium took on a balanced stance, but now he's shifted his weight. Ingenium placed his left leg forward into a runner's stance, quietly priming the thrusters in his arms. This is your last chance, Ingenium. Leave now, or you shall become my next victim. Stain brought his left arm up, grasping hold of the katana on his back. Running away while having the power to stop people like you isn't what a hero would do. But it is something that you should do. Before Stain finished his sentence, Ingenium shot forward, right fist aimed in the small of Stain's back. Stain spun, swinging his right arm backwards, knocking the fist off target. Stain retaliated with a swing of his katana, going for an overhead slash, but Ingenium followed the changed momentum of his punch, arsing his left leg out for spinning hook kick. The blow landed, sending Stain a few steps back. Stain grunted but immediately jumped back in, his katana in his right hand. He swung the sword laterally, looking to bisect Ingenium, but he backflipped out of the way. As soon as Ingenium's feet were on the ground, he shot forward again, this time making it inside Stain's bubble. Using the engines in his arms, Ingenium started a flurry of punches, getting a few good hits in. As he brought his right arm back for a heavy blow, Stain slipped the punch, swinging his left arm up with a dagger in his hand. Ingenium winced behind his helmet as he felt the blade cut through his right shoulder pad and into his arm. Stain got behind Ingenium and followed with a devastating sidekick to his spine. Ingenium flew forward, his arm splayed out as he landed hard on the ground. He tried to move but his body seized. Nothing was responding to his call. His arms weren't moving, his legs were frozen, his head was plastered to the ground. He screamed in pain as he felt a blade stab into him. The fight was over not even a minute after it started. Stain growled, his foot stomped on Ingenium's head. Money a kick to his ribs. The katana was twisted and yanked out, the slightly chipped blade ripping everything in its path. Imposters calling themselves heroes. Heroes acting like celebrities. Heroes acting like villains. Dragging the title of hero through the mud. They are fakes. Bastards that use their quirk for their own self-interest, only helping if there's a camera pointed at them. Stain walked and crouched in front of Ingenium where he could see. I know who you are, Tensei Iida. I know where you came from. You became a hero out of obligation to your family, not for the people. Stain reached down and yanked Ingenium's helmet off and throwing it to the side, revealing the face beneath. What he was met with was a square face with big gray eyes, thin eyebrows that ended in an arrow, and spiked blue hair, now matted with sweat and blood. A rivulet of blood ran down his face where Stain stomped on his head. That's not true. Ingenium refuted, it may have started like that, but it's different now. I help everyone I can, from the little boy who lost his balloon to the old lady crossing the street to the police who need my help bringing down a dangerous villain. It brings me genuine joy seeing their smiles after I help them. Stain let Ingenium stew in his anger before replying, I know. I've been watching you. You've shown yourself to be a true hero, which is why you will not die today. Ingenium didn't let himself feel any relief, he knew that there was a catch. Had you walked away when I warned you to, you could have continued being a hero. A paragon in your own right, but you didn't. Instead, you chose to remain true to form, giving it your all to bring down a dangerous villain, so that others may live in peace. You walked right into the face of danger and didn't back down, as a hero should. Ingenium's face drained of color, picking up on Stain's particular choice of words. You may be a true hero, but you aren't worthy enough to take me down. The only one that can do so is All Might. May you find solace in knowing your sacrifice can help forge the next generation of true heroes, Ingenium. Stain's blade came down once again, right into Ingenium's spine. Stain quickly removed the blade, flicking off the excess blood. He walked over to where he tossed Ingenium's helmet, placing it right in his view. A reminder of who he used to be. He walked deeper into the alley. Just as Stain disappeared from view, a team of Ingenium's sidekicks came around the corner. Ingenium? We came as fast as we could, one of them called out. Their sentence dying in their throat as they came upon the bloody scene. Quick. Call an ambulance, now. Ingenium felt the hold that gripped his body release, and he breathed a sigh of relief. He finally let himself relax as he knew that he was no longer in immediate danger. As he slipped to unconsciousness, he noted to himself that he could no longer feel his legs. Pajero, Toga, Dabi, and Mustard all moved from the bar into the living room above it. As the day grew older, the bar would be seeing more patrons, and none of them wanted to deal with a loud, obnoxious, and drunk crowd. The room had a massive 203cm flat-screen TV mounted on the main wall above a white TV stand, highlighted by a strip of amber light in a cutout alcove. Facing it was a coffee table that stood on skinny legs, beyond that was a matching pair of a dark grey sofa and lavesiette. Nestled at the corner where the two seats met was a small round table. Pajero, Toga, and Mustard all sat on the sofa, while Dabi claimed the lavesiette for himself, sprawling over the arms. Kajero sat on one end, leaning against the arm wholly invested on the TV, while Toga was not so subtly inching herself closer to him. Mustard saw what Toga was doing, and instead of risking her shifting her focus to him, he pressed himself up against the other arm as much as possible. Dabi was watching it all go down and smirked, winking at Mustard. The TV was showing the third event of the sports festival. The stage had just finished being fixed up by Cementus after the fight between Bakugo and Kirishima. Kajero noted that Kirishima's quirk was amazing, but how he was applying it was a waste of its potential. Instead of applying his quirk to his whole body the entire time, he should have only hardened the places that were affected. On screen, President Mick was announcing the first round of the semi-finals would be between Shimura and Iida. "Uo," Shai-kun Toga asked, turning her head to look at him, "who do you think will win? Shimura-chan or the other one?" Pajero tapped his chin and thought, "It depends on if he can last longer than Iida's special move." Toga's eyes sparkled. "Oh, you mean that one where he went super fast in the cavalry battle?" He nodded, looking at Toga as he responded, "I'm not sure, but it looks like it only lasts for maybe 10 seconds. If Shimura-chan can avoid high-speed attacks for 10 seconds, then his win is in the bag. If he can't, then the fight will be over immediately, just like when Iida went against Shiozaki." Toga nodded in agreement and turned her attention back to the TV. Kurogiri materialized shortly after, whispering a message in Kajero's ear before disappearing just as quickly. Pajero puffed out a small plume of smoke and chuckled, "Let's hope Shimura-kun does win, then." He said it quietly, more to himself than anything. Because Toga was all but directly laying on him, she was the only one that heard. She turned her head curiously to see if he would tell her. Kajero noticed, but didn't say anything, simply waving as if it were nothing. "Maybe I should meet up with Stain again." Changing his mind, he spoke up, "Hey Toga, Dabi. Do either of you want to find Stain for me and set up a meeting?" Toga jumped up and faced Kajero, while Dabi leaned in closer, obviously interested as well. "You mean it?" Toga squealed, "are you really going to be working together this time?" "About time I did something worthwhile," Dabi replied, trying and failing to hide the joy in his voice. Mustard complained, "Why didn't you ask me that?" "We leave and make it a little interesting," Kajero teased. "First want to set up the meeting, I will do you exactly one favor. Within reason." Toga squealed even louder, Dabi sported a wild grin, and Mustard groaned at being ignored. "You better not bitch out when I said it, up," Dabi warned. "Are you going to work together?" Toga asked again, jumping on Kajero. Kajero caught her wrist standing up and threw her onto the couch. Mustard scrambled to get out of the way. "That depends on how the talk goes, Toga." "Dabi, do you honestly think I'd go back on my word? Imagine how that'd make me look. And Mustard, because you're a kid and you're just starting out. You have no connections yet." "I'll hold you to that," Dabi responded, already on his way out of the door to get a head start. Toga was still laying on the couch where Kajero threw her, as if in a daze. He looked at her with a question on his face. "What, you're not going to try to catch up with Dabi?" She just shook her head, too busy fantasizing about what would happen when Kajero and Stain worked together. She could just imagine the streets running red. Kajero shrugged, taking his place back on the sofa, moving Toga's feet out of the way and letting them rest on his leg. In the corner of his eye, he could see Mustard brooding, saddened that he's being left out again. Kajero sighed and shook his head, "Mustard." The boy perked up at being called. "If you really want to be involved, you can come with me if or when we meet with Stain. I'll show you a few things about how to make a deal." Mustard smiled, nodding his head, his happiness coming back to him. Kajero gave him a light smile and nodded as well, turning his attention back to the TV. Sat in his chair at the Nomu warehouse, all for one listened in on the conversation and smiled to himself. Yes. Kajero is developing quite nicely. Shimura stared down his opponent, picking them apart as he worked from the bottom up. Iida stood opposite him, doing the same thing. Shimura noticed that his eyes focused more on his hands than anything else. He tested it by flexing them, seeing Iida's eyes squint ever so slightly. Shimura smiled to himself. If he could get Iida fixated on watching his hands, he'd be able to clinch the win. "Are you ready?" Midnight started, her whip poised in the air. Win or lose, Shimura called out to Iida, dropping into a readied stance. No hard feelings, right? Of course not. May the best man win. Iida easily replied, dropping into a stance of his own. Midnight looked between the two boys, satisfied that they're ready to begin. Start. Immediately, Iida rushed forward, timing his steps so he would lead with a roundhouse kick to the head. Shimura gaped in surprise, barely dodging the kick. He felt the air rush past his face as Iida's foot passed harmlessly over his head. Iida's foot landed, causing him to run out and away, as jets do as they swoop around for a second run. Shimura couldn't even bring his hands up to defend himself. Iida was moving faster than he could respond, and from what he could tell, he hasn't even pulled out his super move. Iida came out of his go-around approach and was closing in quickly. In the back of his mind, Shimura remembered what Iida said to himself when they went through Izawa's quirk apprehension test. For 50 meters, I can only go up to third gear, he remembered. Shimura studied the arena, each concrete slab looked about 3 meters by 3 meters, and the platform itself looked like it was set up 6 slabs by 10. Realizing he was about to attempt a complicated equation in the middle of a fight, Shimura shook his head, dismissing the thought, before running to meet Iida in the middle. If he could close the distance faster than Iida could kick it into a higher gear, then his speed would count for nothing. Shimura ran out, his right arm outstretched, looking to clothesline Iida. To his credit, Iida didn't change his speed, momentum, or direction, but chose to barrel through the obstacle. Shimura felt Iida slam into his arm, feeling it nearly come out of its socket before he realized his feet were no longer planted on the floor. Iida had grabbed his arm and was dragging him towards the boundaries. Like hell you're doing that to me, Shimura grunted. He flexed his arm in Iida's grip, making his body as rigid as possible so he could maneuver his way into a position with more base. Shimura's feet skipped once, then twice, on the ground as he finally gained enough control before jumping on Iida's back, Shimura's legs wrapping around Iida's torso. Iida stumbled as he came onto the added weight, nearly falling head over heels. Shimura wrestled his arm out of Iida's grip. Iida fought against him, attempting to throw Shimura off his back, but only succeeding in bringing them both to the ground. Shimura laid under him, but despite being stuck, he was in a much more advantageous spot. Iida knew that as soon as he hit the floor, it would only be a matter of time before Shimura had him pinned, so he scrambled as hard as he could. Iida grunted, fighting his way up as Shimura did his best to drag him back down. I apologize for this, Shimura, Iida warned. Shimura paused momentarily, what are you? Iida threw his head back, slamming into Shimura's face. Shimura felt his nose crumple under the assault, his head slamming into the ground. He yelled out in pain, his grip loosening just enough for Iida to get free. Now out of his grasp, Iida scrambled back to his feet, getting as far back on the arena as he could. Shimura recovered from his attack and shot back up as well, but didn't chase. He blinked the tears out of his eyes, wiping away the excess as Iida resituated himself. And here I thought you didn't know how to play dirty, Vice Pres Shimura taunted. What happened to the straight-laced Iida I've come to appreciate? Iida balked at the insinuation, why I would never. I have always. Shimura let Iida stutter through his denials, using the time to recover from the headbutt. Iida eventually recovered, shaking his head of the thought and crouched down into a runner's stance. Shimura tensed in response, this was what he was expecting from the very beginning of the fight. He didn't need to hear Iida to know what was happening. Over the roar of the crowds, he could make out the engines in Iida's legs revving. 10 seconds. 10 seconds is all I need. That or bank on getting a solid hold without losing my arms in the process. Recipro burst. Iida yelled for the second time today. Iida's form blurred into a mess of blue, white and red as he closed the distance in a blink. Shimura felt his legs leave the ground again as Iida grabbed the back of his shirt, dragging him along like a sack of potatoes. On instinct, Shimura reached back to grab at the offending hand. He felt Iida's wrist in his palm and clamped down as hard as he could, making sure to leave his pinky fingers up. You let me go now, or you lose your hand. Shimura screamed over the howl of the wind. Iida ran for a few seconds longer before abruptly stopping, using his forward momentum to aid in throwing Shimura through the air. He skipped a few times before rolling to a stop, landing just short of the arena's boundary. Moving on instinct, he jumped back up and braced himself for the final blow that would take him out of the competition. He brought his arms up in an X to block his face, clenching his eyes in suspense, but the punch, kick, push, whatever he was expecting never came. He opened his eyes slowly, seeing Iida standing still a few meters away, his face screwed in frustration. Iida cursed himself, I was certain that I was rested enough and drank enough orange juice to perform it again. Midnight paused in confusion as she took in the sight, but figured it out soon enough. Iida, are you able to continue? Iida tried to move his legs, but found that he was rooted to the ground. He shook his head dismally, I am not. Midnight raised her whip in the air, Iida is unable to continue. Shimura moves on to the final round. The crowd stayed quiet for a beat, not expecting such an anticlimactic result to the match, but quickly found their fervor again, bursting into their normal frenzy of excitement again. Shimura slowly walked up to Iida, his hand raised for fist bump. "That was a good fight, Iida. You had me on the back foot the entire time." "I wouldn't say that." Iida shook his head, returning the fist bump. "I wasn't sure how to proceed knowing how your quirk works. Whenever you grabbed me, I had to refrain from giving up right then." Shimura gave him a small smile. "I'm sure you would have figured out how to beat me. Can you walk, or do you need me to carry you?" Iida gave him an embarrassed look. "If you wouldn't mind." Shimura huffed and rolled his eyes good-naturedly, walking in front of Iida so he could piggyback him. Iida hopped on, trying his best to remain composed as he was carried off the stage. "And look at that sportsmanship." President Mick boomed. "That right there, listeners, is the true spirit of competition." Safely hidden from sight in the tunnels again, Iida spoke up. "I do hope my brother was able to watch my fight. I'm just worried I might have disappointed him." "Oh, you can put me down now, I think I can walk again." Shimura chuckled, squatting a little so Iida's legs were touching the ground. When he felt the weight release off his back, he sighed in relief. "If I know anything about your brother between what I've read myself and what you've said about him, I think he'd be proud of what you accomplished," Shimura replied easily. Iida nodded, content to let the conversation drop as they fell into companionable silence. As they were reaching the door for the section reserved for Class 1A, he felt his phone vibrate in his pocket. "Ah, that must be him." Iida excused himself. "I shall catch up with you and the rest of the class soon." Answering the call, he was surprised to find his mother's voice on the other side. "Mother, I lost my match. I'm sorry if I disappointed you," Iida greeted. "Oh, Tenya," his mother cut him off. "I'm not worried about that, you performed admirably. But that's not why I called." "Mother?" "Tenya, please stay calm, but it's about your brother, Tensei." Iida heard his mother sob over the phone, worry leaking into his voice. "Mother? Are you alright? What happened to Tensei?" "Your brother is in the hospital. A villain attacked him." Iida didn't hear the rest of the call. He dropped his phone, too shocked to really process what he was just told. His mind flashed to moments of his brother, both in and out of his costume, seeing him smile and laugh alongside family and sidekicks alike. He knows that being a hero is a dangerous job, but he also knows that his brother is extremely skilled and has never been injured to the point of needing to go to the hospital. "What villain could attack and injure my brother so grievously and get away with it?" Stain sat atop a water tower overlooking Hosu, basking in the city's lights and sounds, and cleaning his blade. He had just finished dealing with another fake, the scent of blood still lingering on his clothes. "This city is a cesspool," he spoke to himself. "Far too many fakes in one city, it's no wonder crime runs wild here. There is no one to enforce law and order." He finished cleaning his sword, swinging it around and sheathing it on his back in one fluid motion. 4 is simply not enough this time. He jumped off the water tower, plunging into the city's depths, looking for the next fake. All for one turned off the audio feed from Kijiro's living room, satisfied with the way things were progressing now on his end. It was unfortunate that Kijiro and Stain didn't see eye to eye on things when they first met, but now that it seems that Kijiro is willing to try again, he has high hopes for the next phase of Kijiro's plan. "Doctor," he called out to the room. A few seconds passed before he received a response. One of the many speakers crackled to life. "Yes, my lord. I apologize for my tardiness, it won't happen again." "It's no problem." All for one dismissed. "How is the latest batch of Nomu coming along?" "Progress is going at the expected rate. I'm able to successfully create lower ends near consistently, and with each success for the lowers, I get that much closer to perfecting the later iterations," the doctor reported. "Were you looking to evaluate them yourself?" "No, not yet. I trust in your work. How many are available for action?" The doctor hummed. "Currently I have 10 nomus. 4 lowers, 3 middles, and 3 upper ends. There are also those in various stages of the development process, but they're not stable enough to be brought out of their tanks yet." "I see. Reserve 1 of each for Kijiro. I want them on standby for him to use until I say otherwise." "Of course, my lord. It will be done." The doctor signed off with a click. All for one steepled his fingers in thought for a moment. He went through all the possibilities that could come of Kijiro's next meeting with Stain. Having plotted out a path that would work best, he opened the audio channel. "Kijiro," he spoke. "Master Kijiro," eventually replied. "You're alone now." It was a simple statement, but one that commanded respect and fast obedience. "I am," Kijiro confirmed. "What do you think of your new recruits?" Kijiro let loose a chuckle. "I think they're pieces of work, but they all bring something helpful to the table. Dobby and Mustard have decent defense and widespread attacks, and both can use them for isolation. Toga's arguably the most useful out of all of them so far. I know I'll be utilizing her skillset more than the others." "Do you trust them to follow your orders to the very end?" I trust them to know what'll happen if they don't. Dobby's the most problematic because I know his true loyalty lies with Stain, but he at least knows to respect his superiors. Mustard's main issue is he's too young to comprehend what's happening, but that can be fixed with time, and Toga seems fully on board. Don't grow complacent with any of them. Of course, Master. It's as you've said, only trust someone after they've died in front of you. All for One smiled in his chair, a feeling almost akin to pride bubbled in his chest. Very good, Kijero. Was that all, Master? No. Was there anyone else besides Shimura that caught your eye? Among the Heraldings? Sure, but none of them in the same way Shimura has. When All for One didn't reply, Kijero added on. Of the finalists, the ones that stood out were Shinso, Tokoyami, Yayoi Rozu, and Uraraka. You didn't mention the powerhouses. All for One noted. I didn't, and it's because their quirks are one-dimensional, and their users even more so. Kijero scoffed, they know they have strong quirks, and flaunt them. But the others, there is so much untapped potential. Shinso has a mental quirk, I'm certain of it. Tokoyami and his dark shadow is something that I would love to explore, as I'm sure so would the doctor. Aoi Rozu's quirk has limitless capabilities, and Uraraka's breaks all the known laws of physics and logic. If I had the chance to work with one or all of them, I could increase their effectiveness. And I suppose we should create an opportunity for you to do so. I suppose we should, Kijero agreed, but first I need to bolster my numbers. Multiple targets require more eyes, after all. Thanks so much for sticking with me through this part of our Deku If journey. I hope you enjoyed it as much as I did. Don't forget to share your thoughts and theories in the comments. I love hearing from you all. If you're excited for the next part, hit that like button and subscribe so you don't miss out. Also, make sure to check out the author and its work. Until next time, stay awesome, and I'll see you in the next video.